Greetings, fellow fans. You're tuned into Supreme Harry, presenting to you today, what if Geralt of Rivia found Harry at age 5 and Gringotts revealed he was heir to 20 great houses. Show some love by liking and subscribing. Enjoy the story ahead. Chapter 1, The Boy in the Cupboard. The portal dumped Geralt into a drainage ditch. He lay there for a moment, staring up at a grey sky that smelled wrong, too clean, too still, with none of the particular bite that the continent's air always carried. No salt from the ponter. No wood smoke from a village. Just exhaust fumes and cut grass and something synthetic he couldn't name. He ran a quick mental inventory, both swords still strapped to his back, the silver one's pommel digging into his shoulder blade, medallion cold against his chest, everything in his pack still present if thoroughly soaked. He sat up. Looked around. Identical houses. Rows of them, stretching in both directions with the monotonous confidence of a place that had never once questioned itself. Every lawn the same measured green. Every car in the driveway a slightly different shade of boring. The street was called Privet Drive, according to a sign that had been put up by someone with a very high opinion of sign straightening. The whole place radiated a kind of aggressive normalcy that Geralt found, instinctively, deeply suspicious. He climbed out of the ditch. The medallion was vibrating. Not the sharp, urgent pulse it gave near wraiths or higher vampires, something lower than that, slower. Like a heartbeat heard through a wall. Magic. Old magic, and a great deal of it, compressed down to a point somewhere nearby. Geralt pulled his coat straight and walked toward it. He'd figure out the portal situation later. Yennefer would either fix it or she wouldn't, and spending energy worrying about things outside his control had never struck him as a productive use of time. Right now his medallion was humming and his instincts were itching, and those two things, in his experience, meant he was about to earn his coin. Except there was no coin here. No contract. No alderman wringing his hands about missing livestock. He stopped in front of number 4 and looked at it. Nothing outwardly remarkable. Neat curtains. A car so aggressively clean it seemed like a moral statement. A doormat that said welcome with the enthusiasm of a hostage note. But the medallion was practically singing now, and underneath the smell of cut grass and chemical cleaner there was something else, something that tightened a very specific, very old reflex in Geralt's chest. Fear. A child's fear. It had a particular quality, thin and chronic and exhausted, the kind that had been going on long enough that it had stopped being acute and started being a climate. He knocked. The man who opened the door was large in the way that suggested he'd been athletic once and had spent the intervening years making up for it at the dinner table. Pink-faced. A mustache that did a lot of work conveying outrage. He looked at Geralt, all of Geralt, the white hair, the yellow eyes, the swords, the general impression of someone who had personally inconvenienced several gods, and his face cycled rapidly through confusion, offense, and something that wanted to be contempt but kept losing its nerve. "Can I help you?" he said, in the tone of a man who very much hoped the answer was no. "Doubt it," Geralt said. "But I'll come in anyway." He didn't push past the man. He didn't have to. He just looked at him, and the man, Vernon Dursley, though Geralt didn't know that yet, stepped back. Some part of his hindbrain, the part that had kept mammals alive through several mass extinctions, recognized Geralt for what he was and started making strongly worded suggestions about compliance. The inside of the house was as aggressively normal as the outside. Framed photos on every surface, a pink-faced boy at various stages of growth, grinning with the confidence of a child who had never been told no. A thin woman appeared from the kitchen doorway, her neck extended with alarm, eyes darting between Geralt and her husband with the quality of a bird calculating escape routes. "Who is, sit down," Geralt said. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just flatly, the way you tell someone the sky was grey. They sat. The medallion was pulling him left. Past the staircase. Toward a door that, now that he was looking at it, was far too small and fit with two separate locks that had absolutely no business being on an interior door. Geralt crouched in front of it. Looked at the locks. Looked at the cat flap cut into its base, not a cat flap, he realized. A slot. For passing food through, maybe. Or a hand that was too small to reach a normal door handle. Something in his jaw tightened. He looked back at the couple on the sofa. Vernon had the reddened, rigid look of a man actively suppressing something, and Petunia had gone very white in a way that was trying to pass itself off as indignation but was actually, underneath, a very specific flavor of shame. Geralt held their gaze for a moment. Then he turned back to the door, drew his silver dagger, the locks were cheap, the blade was not, and opened it. The cupboard under the stairs was about the size of a large wardrobe. Shelves lined one wall, stacked with the overflow of a household that kept everything and valued this room only slightly more than the space between its walls. There was a cot, a camping cot, thin mattressed and listing, shoved into the back corner. On it, curled up with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned exactly how to take up as little space as possible, was a boy. He was small. Even for 5, which Geralt would learn later, he was small, underfed small, the kind where you could see the work the bones were doing. Dark hair going in every direction. Round glasses held together at the bridge with what appeared to be a strip of electrical tape. He was wearing clothes that would have fit the large boy in the photographs, which meant they fit this child the way a tent fit a fence post. He was awake. He'd been awake, Geralt suspected, since the knock at the door. He was looking up at Geralt with enormous green eyes, and he was not, and this was the detail that settled something cold and deliberate in Geralt's chest, he was not crying. He'd gone past that. He was just watching, still and careful, the way wild things watch when they've learned that movement draws attention. Geralt looked at him for a long moment. "Harry," said Petunia from behind him, in a voice stretched thin over something she was trying not to feel, "that is not, you have no right to, when did he last eat?" Geralt said. "Not a question, really." Silence. "Yesterday," the boy said. His voice was small and clear and entirely without self-pity. "Just offering a fact. I think. Or the day before." Geralt looked at the shelves. Found a box of crackers. Found a jar of peanut butter. Set them both in front of the boy, who looked at them for half a second with the focused attention of someone performing a rapid risk assessment, and then opened the peanut butter and started eating with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned never to let food sit. Geralt stood up, turned around, and walked back to the living room. He stood in front of Vernon and Petunia Dursley and looked at them for a long time without saying anything. Vernon's mustache moved. "Now look here, no," Geralt said. The mustache stopped. "Tell me something," Geralt said. "Does it take practice? Locking a child in a cupboard and then learning to walk past it every day? Or does it come naturally?" Petunia's chin came up. "He is not, he's difficult. He's strange. The things he does, the things that happen around him, you can't possibly understand." "Magic," Geralt said. That word landed in the room like a stone into still water. Petunia's face went rigid. "I know what magic is," Geralt said. "I know what it means when a child has it and the people around them don't. I know exactly what it costs a child to be called strange by the people who were supposed to love them." He let a beat pass. "I'm going to take the boy." Vernon found something that wanted to be courage. "You can't just, he's our nephew, there are laws." "There are," Geralt agreed. "And I imagine several of them are relevant to what's in that cupboard. Would you like to discuss it further? With me, specifically, right now? Or would you like me to take the boy and go, and we both understand that we're done here?" The silence was very thorough. He went back to the cupboard. The boy, Harry, had eaten most of the crackers and was working through the peanut butter with the methodical focus of someone who understood this might need to last a while. He looked up when Geralt came back. "Are you taking me somewhere?" he asked. "Yes." "Where?" "Not here," Geralt said. "That enough for now?" Harry considered this with a gravity that was startling on a 5-year-old's face. Then he nodded, once, and stood up and wiped his hands on his oversized trousers. He looked around the cupboard. There was almost nothing to look at, nothing that was actually his, just the cot and the single thin blanket folded on top of it, and then looked back at Geralt. "I haven't got any things," he said. "You've got what you need." "I don't know what I need." "Neither do I, yet," Geralt said. "We'll figure it out." Something shifted in the green eyes. Not trust, that would take time, and Geralt knew it, and would have been suspicious of any 5-year-old who handed it over in the first 5 minutes. But something. A small, tentative reopening of a door that had been shut for a very long time. Harry tucked the peanut butter jar under one arm, apparently deciding it constituted travel provisions, and walked out of the cupboard. He paused in the hallway, looking at his aunt and uncle. They were both staring at him, Vernon with the congested expression of a man processing several competing impulses, Petunia with something that might, if you were generous, have been the ghost of guilt. Harry looked at them for a moment. Then he looked at Geralt. "Can we go?" he said. "Yes," Geralt said. He didn't look back at the Dursleys. Neither did Harry. Roach was tied up at the end of the street, making her feelings about suburban Surrey known to anyone within earshot through the application of a deeply expressive series of snorts. She was also drawing considerable attention, being a horse, and being on Privet Drive, and Geralt untied her with the brisk efficiency of someone very used to Roach's opinions. He looked at the boy. The boy looked at the horse. "What's her name?" Harry asked. "Roach." "Like the bug?" "Like the fish." Harry looked doubtful about this but filed it away without comment. "Has she ever stepped on anyone?" "Frequently," Geralt said. "Deliberately." Harry's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but the shape of where one lived. "I think I like her." Geralt lifted him up into the saddle with one hand, the boy light as a bag of kindling, which was not a thought that improved Geralt's mood. He swung up behind him, gathered the reins, and nudged Roach into motion. "Where are we going?" Harry asked again, from the front of the saddle. "I know a village about a day's ride. We'll get you some clothes. Food. Then I'll think about what comes next." He paused. "My name is Geralt." "I'm Harry," the boy said, with the air of someone remembering their manners from very far away. "I know." Harry was quiet for a minute, watching the identical houses give way to a road, the road beginning to open up towards something greener and less convinced of its own importance. Then, from a voice slightly muffled by the motion of the horse and the oversized collar of his shirt, "What are you?" Geralt considered various answers to this. "A witcher." "What's a witcher?" "Someone who hunts monsters." Another pause. The boy was processing. Geralt could almost hear the gears. "Are there a lot of monsters?" Harry asked. "Yes." "Have you killed many?" "Yes." Does it work?" "Killing them?" It was a strange question for a child. Not strange coming from this child, Geralt would come to understand, but strange in itself, the implicit follow-up hanging in the space where he hadn't finished asking it. Does it make things safer? Does it make things better? Does any of it actually help? Sometimes, Geralt said honestly. Enough that it's worth doing. Harry sat with that for a long time. Long enough that the houses were entirely gone and the road had opened up into late afternoon countryside, the light going gold and slanted across fields that looked confused by their own peacefulness. "Mr. Geralt," Harry said. "Just Geralt." Geralt. Testing it out, like a word in a new language. "My mum and dad died when I was a baby. My aunt says it was a car crash." "That a question?" "I don't know yet," Harry said honestly. Geralt said nothing to that. But his hand, which was resting on his knee, shifted slightly, steadying the boy's seat in the saddle without making a fuss of it. "Am I a monster?" Harry asked. Very quietly. Like he'd been holding that question somewhere it hurt and had finally decided to just let it out. Gerald's jaw worked for a moment. No. Aunt Petunia says, I know what she says, Gerald said. She's wrong. But the things that happen are magic, Gerald said. Not evil. Not dangerous. Not wrong. Magic. There are whole worlds where people have it. Where it's studied and practiced and used for everything from lighting fires to healing broken bones. Your aunt doesn't know anything about it. Neither does your uncle. So their opinion on what it means that you have it is worth exactly nothing. A pause. That clear? The boy turned this over for a long moment. Yes. Good. The road curved. A village appeared in the middle distance, smoke from its chimneys going straight up in the still evening air. Roach picked up her pace, smelling hay and water. Are you going to take me to one of those worlds? Harry asked. The ones with magic? Eventually, Gerald said. When the time is right. Is it far? Far enough. Will there be monsters there? There are monsters everywhere. Harry was quiet again. The village was close now, the first lights coming on in windows. Gerald was already calculating, in with a bath, clean clothes, a proper meal, somewhere safe for the night. Simple needs, first. Everything else could wait. I'm not scared of monsters, Harry said. You should be. A little. Are you scared of them? Sometimes, Gerald said. A little. It keeps me careful. Is that what you're going to teach me? To be careful? Gerald thought about this. About a child with magic running like a live current through him, magic that had vibrated his medallion from the end of a street. About green eyes that had gone past crying into something steadier and colder and more self-contained. About a question, does it work, killing monsters, asked with the weight of genuine philosophy by someone who was 5 years old. Among other things, he said. What other things? How to use a sword. How to read a fight before it starts. How to identify 30 types of monster and what kills them. How to brew a basic potion in the field. How to survive on nothing for 3 days. How to pick a lock. He paused, considering. And eventually, if you want, how to use that magic instead of it using you. Harry had gone very still during this list. Not frightened still. Focused still. That's a lot of things, he said. It is. How long will it take? Years. Okay, said Harry. With the simplicity of someone to whom the concept of an enormous task was not a deterrent, only information. Right. Years. That's the shape of it. Gerald looked at the top of the boy's head, the mad dark hair, the slight tilt of his chin as he watched the village approach. Something about it, he didn't examine it. He was not a man who examined things like this in real time. Later, maybe. Alone, in the dark, the way he examined most things. But something about the particular steadiness of that small spine, the matter-of-fact courage of that okay, settled like a stone dropped into a very still pool. Sending out ripples that didn't stop. He bought him a meat pie from the inn kitchen before anything else. Harry ate it with both hands and both eyes and a kind of total concentration that reminded Gerald, sharply and uncomfortably, of how he'd looked at the peanut butter. Like food was a temporary condition that might be revoked. They got a room. Gerald got a bath drawn for the boy, who accepted this with the solemn pragmatism of someone deciding that a bath was a perfectly reasonable part of being adopted by a monster hunter. Gerald went through his pack and found a shirt of his own that came down to Harry's ankles and would serve as a nightshirt until morning when he could find a market. Harry came out of the bath smaller and cleaner and looking somehow even younger, which Gerald had not thought possible. He climbed into the inn bed with the peanut butter jar, which he'd apparently decided was coming with them no matter what, and looked at Gerald. "You're not going to leave me here," he said. "Not a question." More like a statement he was making to the universe and inviting Geralt to contradict. "No," Geralt said. "Promise?" Geralt sat down on the chair by the window. The room was warm. Roach was in the stable below. The street outside was quiet. He thought about promises. About a word that meant something only if the person saying it intended to keep it, and about how he'd spent most of his adult life being careful which ones he made, because the ones he made, he kept. Even the ones that cost him. "Yes," he said. Harry nodded, once, with enormous gravity. Then he curled up around the peanut butter jar and closed his eyes with the instantaneous efficiency of a child who had learned to sleep wherever and whenever safety briefly presented itself. Geralt sat in the chair for a long time after. The medallion had gone still. In the morning he bought Harry 3 sets of clothes that actually fit, a pair of boots, a warm cloak, and a small wooden-handled knife that he showed the boy how to hold without cutting himself. Harry picked up the grip correction on the second try. The third time, Geralt didn't correct anything. He just watched. "Left hand a little lower," Harry said to himself, adjusting. Checking his own grip against the previous lesson. Already teaching himself, using Geralt as the reference point. Geralt bought him a book too. A general one, full of pictures of plants and animals. Harry opened it on the road and didn't look up for 2 hours. They moved through the English countryside over the next several days, Geralt navigating by something that was not quite a map and not quite instinct, more like the particular attention of someone who had spent their whole life moving through hostile territory and knew how to read the shape of a world that was trying to communicate. He was looking for a threshold. The place where his world had bled through into this one was somewhere nearby, and these things rarely happened once without happening again. At night he made camp. Harry helped without being asked, collecting wood with the focused competence of someone who had decided to be useful as a matter of policy. The first night he dropped a log on his foot and said bloody hell with the blistering conviction of someone who'd been storing that phrase for a while. Geralt looked at him. "Sorry," Harry said, not sounding it. "Don't be sorry. Just watch where you're dropping it." Harry looked at him for a second. Then grinned, a quick, bright, slightly startled thing, as if the grin had surprised him as much as anyone. It lasted only a moment before being filed back away somewhere. But it had been there. That was the thing. The fire. The smoke going up. The boy sitting across from it, feeding a leaf into the edge of the flames and watching it burn with the focused curiosity of someone for whom the entire world was still recently rendered interesting. "Geralt," Harry said. Do you have a family?" "No." "Did you ever?" Geralt was quiet for a while. "Had a teacher. She was something like a mother, maybe." "What happened to her?" "She's alive," Geralt said. "We don't always get along." Harry thought about this. "I think my mum and dad loved me," he said. "My aunt said they were useless. But she said everything was useless that she didn't understand. And she said my magic was useless." He picked up another leaf. "So I think it means they probably did." Geralt looked at him across the fire. "That," he said, "is good reasoning." Harry filed the compliment away with the same economy he applied to everything else. But the set of his shoulders changed, slightly. A very small unlocking of something that had been braced. On the 4th day, the medallion started humming again, different this time, horizontal rather than vertical, pointing forward along the road like a compass finding north. On the 5th day, the air went strange. It wasn't visible, exactly. More like a shimmer at the edge of vision, the kind of thing that could be mistaken for heat haze except the day was cool and overcast and England was not doing heat haze on principle. Geralt pulled Roach up and studied it. Harry, who had been reading the book again, looked up. "What is it?" he asked. "A threshold," Geralt said. "Door between worlds." Harry closed the book very carefully and looked at the shimmer with an expression of total attention. "Is that what brought you here?" "Something like it." "Can we go through it?" Gerald was quiet. The medallion was steady, pointing at the shimmer. It was aligned with the deep familiar resonance of the continent's magic, the coarser, older, more deeply woven kind, nothing like the strange compressed electricity of Harry's gift. Going through meant going home. Going through meant the path, the contracts, the particular brutality of a world that was clear about its brutality. It meant taking a 5-year-old into a world with wraiths and neckers and drowners and worse, considerably worse. He looked at the boy. Harry was looking at the shimmer with that steady, serious face, and Gerald could see it, the curiosity and the readiness, and beneath them, way beneath them, the smaller thing. The thing that was hoping. Not to go through the door exactly. Just to keep moving. Just to not go back. It won't be easy, Gerald said. I know. It's dangerous. I know. You trust me, Gerald said. Not a question, an honest observation, mildly surprised at its own existence. Harry looked at him for a second. Then, with that same quiet directness, you came back with breakfast every morning. You didn't sell me to anyone. You bought me books and didn't tell me what to think about them. And when you made a promise you kept it. He shrugged, small and precise. Yes. I trust you. Gerald looked at him for a long moment. Then he clicked his tongue at Roach, who needed no further encouragement. She'd been eyeing the shimmer with the alert attention of a horse who had made this trip before and had opinions about it, and they rode through. The world shivered. The gray suburban sky became a darker sky, enormous and full of stars that had no interest in city lights because there were no city lights. The smell of England, exhaust and cut grass and chemical calm, became the smell of the continent, pine and river water and smoke and something underneath that was just wild, the smell of a world that had not been tamed and did not intend to be. Harry drew a sharp breath and looked up. Oh, he said. Quietly. Like the stars had said something to him personally. Welcome to the continent, Gerald said. The boy sat up straighter in the saddle, eyes moving across the tree line, the dark sky, the shapes of hills in the moonlight. There was something in his face that Gerald recognized, because he'd felt it himself a very long time ago at the beginning of everything. This is the real world. This is the size of it. What do we do first? Harry asked. Find a town, Gerald said. Get supplies. Then I have a contract to finish. Can I come? You'll stay at the inn. Harry's jaw set slightly. I'll stay at the inn this time, he said. The precision of that qualifier, this time, was so pointed and so deliberate and so fundamentally sensible that Gerald almost smiled. This time, he allowed. Harry nodded, satisfied, and looked back at the stars. Roach moved through the dark forest at an easy canter, and the continent closed around them, and the world that had been called Privet Drive was somewhere on the other side of a shimmer that was already closing. It was not the last time Gerald would wonder what he'd done. Whether it was the right thing. Whether a monster hunter's road was any kind of life for a child. But Harry had stopped holding himself like someone waiting to be hit. That was something. Gerald held on to it. That was enough for now. Chapter 2, 6 years on the path. The first contract Gerald took after crossing back to the continent was a drowner nest outside a village called Breckenham, 3 days' ride through hill country, the village itself a cluster of stone buildings with the particular hunched look of a place that had learned to expect bad weather and bad news in roughly equal measure. He left Harry at the inn with the owner, a broad woman named Marta who had the practical warmth of someone who'd raised 6 children and retained none of her illusions about them. He paid for 3 nights, left coin for meals, and gave Harry the field manual from his pack, a battered thing, handwritten in margins as much as in the actual text, cataloging creatures, their weaknesses, their habits, their particular ways of killing you. Read this, he said. Harry took it with both hands. Already opening the cover. All of it? What you can get through. Harry nodded without looking up. Gerald left. The drowner contract took a day and a half, which was faster than expected. He came back to the inn smelling of swamp water and with a shallow cut along his forearm that had already begun closing, Witcher healing, one of the gifts of the mutations, faster and more complete than anything natural. Marta had opinions about the smell but kept them to the category of significant looks rather than words. Harry was sitting at the table where Geralt had left him. The field manual was closed in front of him. Geralt could tell from the way the spines sat that every page had been turned. Drowners, Harry said, without looking up from the table where he appeared to be drawing something. They come out of water. You need silver or a silver-edged blade. They're weak to ogroid oil and the Ard sign, which is a telekinetic force application. He looked up. What does telekinetic mean? Moving things with your mind, Geralt said, hanging his coat. Oh. Harry looked at his drawing. He'd sketched a drowner from the manual's illustration, reasonably accurately, and was annotating it with notes in small, careful letters. I can do that, he said, with the air of a minor observation. Move things. Sometimes they move when I don't mean them to. When something happens. He paused. I broke a window at my aunt's once. When Dudley was, he stopped. Started again. When I was angry. Geralt sat down across from him. Looked at the drawing. Does it happen other times? Not just anger. Harry thought about this seriously. When I'm scared, he said. And once when I was very cold, a warm feeling came and the frost on the window went away. And I made a plant grow back once when I stepped on it. And, he stopped again, looking at Geralt with that careful gauging look, checking whether this was welcome territory. Go on, Geralt said. I made a snake talk to me, Harry said. At my cousin's zoo. Well, I don't know if I made it. It just started. We were talking. And then Dudley pushed me and I got angry and the glass disappeared and the snake got out. He said all of this quickly, with the focused carefulness of someone recounting evidence, trying to present the case before the verdict came. My aunt said I was dangerous. She locked me in the cupboard for a week. Geralt was quiet for a moment. You talked to a snake. Yes. And it talked back. Yes. It said it had never seen Brazil. Harry paused. I don't know what Brazil is. I don't either, Geralt said truthfully. Then, speaking to serpents is a form of magical ability called Parseltongue in the world you came from. It's rare. And it means nothing dark about you, whatever you've been told. Harry looked at him steadily. My aunt said it meant I was wrong inside. Your aunt, Geralt said, with the flat precision of a man selecting exactly the right tool for the job, was frightened of things she couldn't control, and she took that out on you. That is a thing adults do. It is one of our worst habits. What it told you about you was nothing. What it told you about her was that she was a coward. The word landed cleanly. Harry sat with it for a moment. Okay, he said, and went back to his drawing. Gerald watched him annotate the drowner sketch for a moment. Then he went to wash the swamp off himself and thought about a 5-year-old who spoke to snakes and moved glass with his mind and had read an entire field manual in a day and a half, and understood that what he had brought home from Privet Drive was something he had profoundly underestimated. 6 years on the path with a child was not a thing Gerald had ever expected to write into his future. The first year was the hardest, not in the way he'd anticipated, not the logistical struggle of managing a small person through hostile terrain, but in the quieter, more persistent difficulty of learning what Harry needed without knowing how to ask. The boy was self-contained to a degree that was, in someone so young, somewhere between impressive and alarming. He didn't complain. He didn't demand. He watched, and absorbed, and adapted with a speed that kept catching Geralt off guard. But he flinched, that first year. Unexpected movements. A hand raised too fast, reaching for something overhead, nothing sinister, just reaching, and Harry's whole body would go sideways and quiet. Not cowering exactly. More like a very efficient, practiced bracing. Gerald registered every instance and said nothing and made sure, going forward, that his movements were readable, and the flinching gradually became less frequent and eventually stopped appearing except in circumstances where a flinch was entirely reasonable. That was a victory, though he kept it to himself. The sword work started at 6. Geralt found a practice sword in a market in Novigrad, a wooden one, well balanced, the right size for small hands, and began with grip and stance. Harry practiced the grip until it was natural, then began to ask questions that were not the questions of a child playing at swords. Why this hand position and not the one you use for the two-handed grip? What does it trade? Geralt explained. Harry thought about it and tried both ways and nodded and came back the next morning with more questions. The footwork took longer. Harry's feet were quick, but the coordination between hand and foot positioning, the way a sword fighter moves in a constant triangulation, always calculating the next line before completing the current one, was the thing that took months rather than weeks. But when it clicked completely. Geralt would watch him drill and think, there it is. The moment a student stops doing steps and starts doing the thing itself. He was 7 the first time he asked to try an igni sign. They were camped and Geralt had lit a fire with it, the quick, focused release of magical force shaped into heat and direction, and Harry had watched with that total attention. "What are you doing with your hand?" Harry said. "Channeling the sign. It's a specific pattern that the body learns. Focuses the intent. Can I try?" "It requires magical ability." Harry gave him a look that could only be described as extremely patient. "Right," Geralt said. "Hold your hand like this." What happened next was technically an igni sign. In the sense that there was a fireball. The fire was the issue, the signs as Geralt used them were controlled, directional, proportional to the intent. What came out of Harry's hand was about 4 times that size, shaped somewhat like a comet, and set fire to a tree that had not, by any reasonable assessment, been involved in the lesson. They looked at it. "I'll work on the scale," Harry said. "That would be good," Geralt said. Over the next months, scale became a sustained project. Harry had no shortage of raw power, that much had been evident from Privet Drive, but precision was the discipline, and precision required the kind of patient repetition that Harry threw himself into with a ferocity that was sometimes difficult to watch, because it had the quality of someone trying to prove something to themselves about whether they could be trusted with the thing they were. "You don't have to earn the right to your own magic," Geralt told him once, watching him practice art containment, trying to push exactly as hard as necessary to move a rock without shattering it, and mostly failing. Harry stopped and looked at him. "I know," he said. "But I want to be good at it. Not just big. Good." Which was, Geralt thought, approximately the right answer. The first time Harry killed something, he was 9. Geralt maintained that it had not been planned, and this was technically accurate. He had a contract on a small Necker warren 3 miles outside the village, and Harry had been told to stay at camp, and Harry had stayed at camp, right up until a Necker scout, because Neckers, being fundamentally uncooperative, had decided to widen their perimeter, came through the tree line and into the camp while Geralt was a half-mile away being busy with the rest of the problem. Geralt heard the sounds. He finished the contract at a speed that was aggressive even for him, and came back to camp to find Harry standing near the fire, the wooden practice sword, which he'd apparently grabbed because it was the nearest thing, broken in half across his knee. Near him, a Necker was not entirely dead but was headed there with commitment. Harry had 3 shallow claw marks across his right forearm and the expression of someone who had just discovered something important about themselves, and was not entirely sure yet what to do with it. Geralt looked at the Necker. Looked at the broken practice sword. Looked at Harry. "You broke my sword," he said. "Your wooden one," Harry said. "I'll get you a new wooden one. It served its purpose. How's your arm?" Harry looked at it. "Hurts. Doesn't seem deep. Let me look." He checked it, shallow, as reported, already beginning to clot. He cleaned it, bound it, said nothing for a moment. "Then, walk me through it." Harry did, with the methodical precision he brought to everything. The Neckers approach from the northeast, the angle of attack, the sign he'd attempted first, Ard, which had staggered it but not stopped it, the decision to pick up the sword, the series of strikes, where his stance had gone wrong and what he'd done to compensate, and what he thought he should have done differently. Geralt listened to the full debrief. The initial Ard was right, he said. Necker skulls are thick. You needed more follow-through on the second strike, you pulled it at the last second. I know, Harry said. I hesitated. You know why? A long pause. Because I'd never actually, and it felt different. From drilling. It always does, Geralt said. What happened after the hesitation? I stopped hesitating, Harry said. Geralt looked at him. In the firelight, 9 years old with a bound arm and claw marks drying to brown at the bandage edge, Harry looked back with those green eyes that had been, since Privet Drive, in the process of becoming something very different from afraid. Good, Geralt said. He made Harry do the extended drill of Necker anatomy and weaknesses from memory before bed, not as punishment but as method, embedding the lesson while it was still warm. Harry recited it without complaint and fell asleep over the last page of his current book, which was a treatise on alchemy that was technically beyond him and which he was getting through anyway by sheer stubborn force of interest. Gerald turned the lamp down and thought about what it meant that the thing he felt most clearly right now was something adjacent to proud. He did not examine it. He went to sleep. At 10, Harry was 5 feet tall and growing towards something that was going to be neither large nor small but precise, the body of someone built for speed and economy of motion rather than mass. He'd grown into his glasses, or rather the glasses had been replaced twice and now sat properly on a face that was resolving from the general soft roundness of early childhood into something more defined and rather startling. Green eyes and dark hair and a scar on his forehead that was, in the world of the continent where scars told stories, a fairly normal thing to carry. He was, by any measure, formidable. Not in the way Gerald was formidable, that was decades of mutation and training and accumulated violence, but in the particular way of someone who was still building and already remarkable. His swordsmanship had moved past competence into the territory where instinct had taken over from calculation. His signs were controlled and powerful in ways that occasionally made mages stop and stare. He could brew 4 field potions from memory and had opinions about the 5th. He spoke 3 languages, identified 37 species of monster by sign and track, and had a habit of walking into a new location and quietly, without appearing to do it, mapping every exit. He had also, somewhere around 9, discovered books with the passion of someone who had been malnourished and then found out about libraries. Gerald had, over the years, accumulated a small library of his own across saddlebags and in rooms, the books rotating out as new ones came in. Harry had read most of them at least twice. He had opinions about all of them. He had started, around 10, writing his own marginal notes in a style that was simultaneously insufferable and genuinely perceptive, and Gerald had once found himself reading the margins more carefully than the text. He didn't mention this. They moved, as they'd always moved, following contracts and the path through a world that was reliably full of things that needed killing. Harry's presence had shifted, over the years, from something Gerald managed to something that was simply part of the operational unit, a shift that had happened so gradually and so naturally that it was difficult to locate the exact moment it became true. The first time Harry acted as backup on a contract, rather than staying behind, they were hunting a particularly unpleasant wraith outside a village in southern Velan. Gerald had assessed the situation, the wraith was anchored, which meant bait would be needed to pull it to the prepared ground, and turned to Harry with the dispassionate calculation of someone making a tactical decision. I need something to draw it out, he said. Strong emotional signature. Fear or grief or guilt, something old. Harry looked at the sight. I can do that. You know what it'll try when it gets close. Confuse me with illusions. Show me whatever it thinks will stop me moving. He met Gerald's eyes. I know the counter. Keep the sign ready on the dominant hand. Don't engage the illusion, engage the source. And if the illusion is convincing? Harry was quiet for a half-second. Then, I know the difference between what's real and what something is trying to make me see. I've had practice. The bitterness in that was matter of fact, not dramatic. The reference to Privet Drive was not dressed up or displayed. It was just a fact, referenced cleanly and left there. Geralt held his gaze for a moment. Nodded. The wraith came out of the dark like smoke finding a crack, drawn by whatever Harry projected. Geralt didn't ask what, later, and Harry held his ground with a stillness that was not fearlessness but mastered fear, which was better, and the moment the wraith committed to its approach Geralt came in from the flank with moon dust and the silver sword and the contract was over in 40 seconds. After, Harry sat down on a rock and breathed for a minute. He was pale under his normal color, the particular pallor of an adrenaline come down. What did it show you? Geralt asked. A pause. The cupboard, Harry said. You not coming back. Brief. Factual. But I was right there, he added, and there was something in the tone that said he'd held on to that, the knowledge, the concrete fact, the anchor. He's right there. I can see him. This is not real. So it wasn't hard, he said. Good, Geralt said. Was the fear signature good enough? To draw it out? Evidently. Harry nodded and stood up, dusting off his hands, and they walked back to camp in the dark and Harry made tea without being asked and they sat with it in the pleasant, easy silence that had gradually, over 6 years, become the natural weather of their company. There was a woman in Novigrad called Tris Merigold who was a sorceress and who Geralt had known, in the complex way he knew several people, for longer than was straightforward to explain. She met Harry for the first time when he was 8, and then again at 10, and both times she had looked at him with an expression that Geralt recognized as assessment from someone who knew what magic felt like in a person and was recalibrating everything they thought they knew. He's extraordinary, she told Geralt, while Harry was occupied on the other side of the market negotiating the price of a book with the focus of someone with finite coin and strong opinions. I know, Geralt said. His magical signature is, it's not from here. I've never felt anything quite like it. There are layers to it. It's as if he has 2 different systems running simultaneously. The Witcher signs he's learned sit on top of what he came with, Geralt said. They're compatible. The base system is different. Where is he from, Geralt? Actually from another world, Geralt said. There are places there, places specifically for people like him. Schools. Training. He watched Harry across the market, currently employing a negotiating tactic that appeared to involve the book's seller and a very compelling logical argument about the book's actual market value. He'll find out about them eventually. Tris looked at him for a long moment. Are you planning to take him back? When he's ready, Geralt said. Ready for what? To not need anyone to protect him, Geralt said. From any of it. Tris was quiet for a second. Then, Geralt. You know that sounds like what you do when you're afraid of sending someone into something that might hurt them. I'm not afraid, Geralt said. You are, she said, not unkindly. You're absolutely terrified. It's quite sweet. Geralt said nothing. Across the market, Harry had apparently concluded his negotiation successfully, because he was walking back with the book under his arm and the expression of a person who had come out on the right side of an argument. He caught Geralt's eye, held up the book, and raised his eyebrows once in the gesture that meant solved it, let's go. Tris watched this exchange with a smile. He looks like you, she said. He doesn't look anything like me, Geralt said. Not his face, Tris said. I know that's not what I mean. The morning the letter came, Harry was 10 3/4. It arrived in a way that was conspicuous even by the standards of a life that regularly included monsters, a barn owl, swooping down onto the fence post outside the village where they'd stopped for the week, and sitting there with the tolerant patience of something that had found what it was looking for and was prepared to wait. Geralt came outside and looked at it. It looked back at him. Harry came out behind him, took one look at the owl, and said, "That's a wizarding owl. You know what that is?" "I read about it." He took the letter from the owl, which departed with the manner of a job completed, and looked at the envelope. Mr. H. Potter, the upstairs room, the Silver Bell Inn, Merivale. Both of them looked at this for a moment. It knows where we are, Harry said. It's magical correspondence, Geralt said. It finds the recipient. How does it know my name is Potter? Do you know your name is Potter? Harry looked at him. I know my name is Harry. I thought Potter was probably my father's name. I didn't know, I haven't used it. Apparently someone knows it, Geralt said. Harry opened the letter. It was from a place called Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and it was informing one Harry Potter that a place had been reserved for him in the school's first-year class commencing September 1st, and that an accompanying supply list was enclosed, and that he was to confirm his attendance by owl post return. Harry read it twice. Then read it again. A school, he said. For magic, Geralt said. For my kind of magic, Harry said. He looked up. From my world. My original world. It would seem so. Harry was quiet for a moment. He looked at the letter with an expression that was complex and genuine and not entirely happy, which Geralt appreciated. The simplistic reaction would have been uncomplicated excitement. Harry's relationship with his original world was not simple. The original world had put him in a cupboard. Will I have to go back there? Harry asked. To England? Likely. Will you come? I'll get you there, Geralt said. After that you'll leave, Harry said. Not accusatory. Just precise. Not permanently, Geralt said, and this surprised them both slightly. I'd need to, he stopped. Start it again. The path will take me where it takes me. But I'll come back. Harry looked at him for a second with those green eyes that didn't miss anything. You've never said that before, he said. You've always just, come back. Without saying. I know, Geralt said. A beat. Okay, Harry said. Then he looked back at the letter. There's a supplies list. I need an owl, a cauldron, several sets of robes, standard books, and, he looked up. Dragon hide gloves. Does that mean real dragon hide? Likely. Good, Harry said, with the satisfaction of someone who had skinned 3 wyverns and had opinions about quality materials. I want the good ones. They wrote back. The letter was brief, confirmation of attendance, no other notes. Harry sealed it and sent it with the inn's common owl, a pragmatic creature with no opinions about its employment. That night, sitting by the fire, Harry was uncharacteristically quiet. Not troubled quiet, thinking quiet, the deep kind. Geralt, he said, eventually. I know things they won't expect, Harry said. The other students. From my world. If they've grown up there, they'll know things I don't, customs and politics and histories. But I know things they won't. He turned this over. I'm not going to pretend I don't. No reason to, Geralt said. Some people might not like it, Harry said. A first year who can already, he gestured at the fire, which he'd lit from across the clearing without standing up, using a sign with one hand while reading, and which Geralt had barely registered. Some people don't like things that challenge their idea of what's possible, Geralt said. That's their problem. Not always, Harry said, with the pragmatic wisdom of someone who had learned that other people's discomfort sometimes arrived with consequence. Sometimes it becomes your problem. Then you deal with it, Geralt said. But you don't shrink yourself so other people are comfortable. That's not a trade worth making. Harry sat with this. The fire crackled. I'm not afraid of it, Harry said. Hogwarts. The other students. Whatever it is I'm going back into. A pause. But I want to know what I'm walking into. Can we find out more before September? That's what Diagon Alley is for, Geralt said. Wizarding Market. London. You know about it? I've done my research, Geralt said, because he had, quietly and over some time, because he had known this letter would come eventually and had decided, without articulating it, even to himself, that when it did, Harry would walk into that world with every possible advantage. Harry looked at him for a long moment with an expression that Geralt found difficult to look at directly, the way you found it difficult to look at certain things that were too clear and too direct and reflected back at you more than you'd meant to put out. Okay, Harry said. London. And there's a bank, right? Gringotts. Wizarding Bank. Dad's family would have had a vault. We'll check, Geralt said. And if there's money there, I can buy my own supplies. You don't need, I want to, Harry said, quietly. I want to stand in my father's vault and buy my own wand. Geralt understood this. The claiming of a thing. The acknowledgement of a lineage, on your own terms, in your own time. He nodded. Harry went back to his book. But before he'd read 3 pages, he said, without looking up, Geralt. Thank you. For all of it. The swords and the signs and the field manual and Roach and, all of it. Geralt said nothing for a moment. Don't get sentimental, he said, finally. Harry's mouth curved. Quick and bright and no longer quite as startled at itself as it used to be. Too late, he said. Geralt looked at the fire. After a moment he said, You've done well. The work. All of it. He stopped. There was more than that, but the more than that didn't have very good words. He stopped again. I know, Harry said, and his voice was easy and sure, because he did know, because Geralt had shown it 100 times in 100 practical ways that added up, over 6 years, to something that had no name but didn't need one. The fire burned. Somewhere in the dark forest, something called once and went quiet. They sat, and the night was warm enough, and in the morning they would begin the preparations for a journey back across the threshold, back to England, back to a world that had put Harry Potter in a cupboard and had absolutely no idea what was coming. Chapter 3, What Gringotts Knows. The threshold back to England opened on a Tuesday morning in late July, in a field outside Oxford that smelled of summer and diesel and the particular British combination of damp and optimism. Harry stepped through first. He stood in the long grass and looked at England with the expression of someone taking stock of a place they'd left under difficult circumstances. The sky was doing its customary grey-white thing. Somewhere nearby a road existed, because there was always a road in England. He was wearing dark travelling clothes, well-made, continent-cut, nothing like the oversized hand-me-downs he'd left in, with his wand holster on his right forearm and his short blade at his hip, because he had not, in 6 years on the path, developed the habit of going anywhere unarmed. He looked like what he was, someone who had been living in a world with monsters and had taken the appropriate precautions. Gerald came through behind him with Roach, who stepped into England and immediately expressed her opinion of it via the medium of a deeply skeptical snort. She'll need stabling, Harry said. I know. Gerald scanned the horizon. Town's that way. We'll sort the horse, get to London, get the bank done, supplies after. Harry nodded and they started walking, and England received them without ceremony, which was exactly how Harry preferred it. They stabled Roach at a yard outside Oxford, whose owner looked at Gerald's swords and Harry's road-worn gear and decided, with the pragmatic flexibility of someone who'd seen enough of the world to know that asking questions was usually the more expensive option, to simply take the coin and provide excellent service. The train to London was Harry's first, and he observed it with the focused attention he applied to new mechanisms, watching the doors, the rails, the speed, before opening a book and reading for the remainder of the journey with one leg up on the seat, completely at home with the motion in the way of someone who had spent years on horseback. Gerald sat across from him and looked out the window at England going past and thought about a drainage ditch in Surrey and a cupboard with 2 locks on it. You're thinking very loudly, Harry said, without looking up. I don't think loudly, Gerald said. You have a specific kind of silence when you're thinking about something old, Harry said, turning a page. It's a heavier silence than the normal kind. Gerald had no answer to this. Harry went back to his book, satisfied. London arrived with all its noise and scale, and Harry walked through it with the easy, calibrated alertness of someone who was accustomed to environments that were trying to kill him and found a city that was merely chaotic to be pleasant by comparison. They found the leaky cauldron on the third attempt. The second attempt had been a normal pub, which had still served a reasonable lunch. Gerald had been to London before, twice, via different thresholds, and knew the general shape of the wizarding entrance. The barman, Tom, looked at Harry and then looked at Gerald and then at Harry again and clearly had something he wanted to say, but the combination of Harry's steady look and Gerald's existence was apparently sufficient to suggest that this was not the moment for it. Diagon Alley opened up like a held breath released, the archway, the brick wall, and then the whole bright chaotic street with its potion fumes and owl song and the particular smell of spellwork, which Harry had learned to identify as a specific frequency in his medallion, a gift from Gerald, a smaller version, fitted to his magical signature, that sat at a low pleased hum around active magic. He stopped and looked at it. "Well," he said. "First time in the wizarding world proper," Gerald said. "It's smaller than I expected," Harry said, meaning the street. "But the magic's bigger." He tilted his head, feeling the medallion. "There are old spells on some of these buildings. Very old. Layers of them. Foundation magic," Gerald said. "Like the ward stones in Novigrad." "Yes. But different. Different grammar." Harry filed this and moved on, because the street was full and the bank was waiting and he had, in the past 6 years, developed a very efficient relationship with his own curiosity, acknowledge it, note it, get to it when there was time. Gringotts sat at the end of the alley like a statement. White marble and goblin guards and architecture that communicated, in every line and angle, an institution that had survived longer than most governments and had strong opinions about why. Harry looked at it as they approached and something in his expression went still and deliberate. "I've read about goblins," he said, quietly. "What conclusion did you draw?" "That they're serious," Harry said. "That they have their own sense of honor and debt and deal-keeping. That they respect competence and find condescension offensive. That most wizards get the relationship wrong by treating them as servants." He paused. "And that Gringotts is not a bank in the normal sense. It's a sovereign institution that provides banking services." Gerald glanced at him. "Where did you read that?" "Margins of your old continent trade law treatise," Harry said. "You'd written a note comparing goblin financial structures to dwarven guilds. It was interesting." Gerald thought about denying having made that note and decided it wasn't worth the effort. The doors admitted them into the grand hall of Gringotts, and Harry paused for a half-step to take it in, the vaulted ceiling, the hundreds of goblins at their stations, the rushing of carts somewhere deep below, the smell of gold and stone and very old magic, and then walked to the nearest available teller with the unhurried directness of someone who knew exactly why they were here. The goblin behind the counter had the characteristically sharp features and sharper eyes of his kind, and he looked at Harry with the practiced appraisal of someone who evaluated things for a living. "I'd like to access the Potter vault," Harry said. "Harry James Potter. I've just come of age for access." He paused. "I'd also like to request an inheritance test. Full lineage, all houses, living and extinct." The goblin was still for a moment. His eyes moved to Gerald, taking in the swords, the medallion, the general fact of him, and then back to Harry. "The inheritance test is not a standard service," the goblin said. "I know," Harry said. "I'm requesting it specifically. I understand there are fees involved. I'm prepared to pay them." A beat. "Blood test for vault access, full inheritance registry for the lineage claim," the goblin said. "We don't run these often. The last full inheritance test for the Potter line was," he stopped. "Checked something." His expression shifted, slightly, in a way that was very controlled and very interesting. "When?" Harry asked. "That information will be available as part of the test itself," the goblin said carefully. "If you'll follow me." He led them through a side door and down a corridor that felt older than the main hall, the stonework here was rougher, less dressed, the kind of construction that had been here first and had everything else built around it. Into a room that was spare and functional, a stone table, a small brazier, and a shallow stone bowl engraved with symbols that Harry's medallion responded to immediately with a low, focused pulse. The goblin's name, it turned out, was Ragnarok, which was not a low-ranking name. Harry registered this without comment, though Geralt did. A second goblin appeared with a document, a silver stylus, and a look that suggested significant events were expected, and this was being officially witnessed. "A drop of blood," Ragnarok said, indicating the bowl. Harry drew his own knife, the short blade, quick and practiced, and nicked his left thumb without hesitation. Ragnarok blinked. Apparently most people needed a moment with the ceremonial lancet. The blood hit the bowl and the room did something. Not dramatically, not fire or thunder or the kind of magical display that announces itself. Something quieter. The symbols around the bowl began to glow with a steady, deep gold, and the document unrolled itself across the table and the silver stylus began to move. It moved for a long time. Harry stood with his hands loose at his sides and watched the stylus. Geralt stood slightly behind and to his left, the position they defaulted to in anything that might become a situation, Harry in front and moving, Geralt at the angle, covering. Ragnarok watched the stylus. His expression, which had begun at carefully neutral, was doing something more complex now. The second goblin was watching the document with the focused attention of someone who has just seen something they need to understand completely before they react to it. The stylus stopped. The silence in the room had the texture of something that needed to be carefully handled. Ragnarok looked at the document for a long moment. Then he looked at Harry. Then at the document again. "Mr. Potter," he said, and his voice had a quality that Geralt, in 30 years of professional experience reading rooms, identified as careful respect from a source that did not give it lightly. "Are you aware of your full family history?" "No," Harry said simply. "That's why I asked for the test." Ragnarok looked at him for another moment. Then he picked up the document, and began. Harry James Potter was, by blood and lineage, the direct heir to House Potter. This was expected. He was also, by maternal blood descent, heir to House Evans, a minor house, recently activated by the maternal magical line. He was heir to House Peveril, through direct paternal descent, one of the oldest magical houses in Britain, the lineage of the three brothers of legend, extinct in the recognized wizarding registry since the 15th century and yet apparently not extinct at all. He was heir to House Gryffindor, through a cadet branch of the Peveril line that nobody had apparently noticed converging. He was heir to House Slytherin, through the maternal black line, 2 generations back, through a connection that had been quietly and consistently unrecorded in the official registers and which Ragnarok addressed with a tone that suggested the word unrecorded was doing a significant amount of work. By the time Ragnarok reached the 7th house, Harry had not moved or changed expression, but something in the set of his shoulders had gone very still in the way that meant he was processing something significant and was not yet done. By the 10th, the second goblin had left the room and returned with a third, and all three were looking at the document with an attention that was no longer purely professional. 20 houses in total. Some ancient and dormant. Some whose lordships had been in legal dispute for generations. Some whose associated vaults, Ragnarok said, in a tone that was now almost quiet with its own weight, had not been accessed by their rightful heir in over 3 centuries. Some of which had been accessed by someone else. This last part Ragnarok delivered with deliberate precision, and Harry, who had been standing in focused stillness through the entire reading, looked up. "Accessed," he said. "Third-party access," Ragnarok said. "Via proxies, through legal instruments of guardianship and trust management, over a period of approximately 9 years." He paused. The instruments were filed correctly. They were, however, filed without the consent or knowledge of the rightful heir, at a time when the rightful heir was a minor in guardian custody and therefore, another pause, very precisely placed. Legally unable to object. The room was very quiet. "How much?" Harry said. Ragnarok named a number. It was not a small number. Gerald watched Harry hear it. Watched the very slight tightening around his eyes, not shock, not distress, something cleaner and colder. The expression of someone filing information and deciding what to do with it. Which houses were accessed, Harry said. Potter. Gryffindor. Peveril, partially. 2 of the currently dormant houses whose vault management was transferred to trust arrangement following the notation of their heir as a minor ward of the state. Ragnarok set the document down. The proxies in question are not named in Gringotts records. The trust instruments were filed through a solicitor whose office has since been dissolved. However, he stopped. However, Harry said. The account to which transfers were directed, Ragnarok said, is registered to a Mr. L. Malfoy of Malfoy Manor, Wiltshire. The name landed in the room. Gerald watched Harry's face and saw nothing that was not entirely controlled. Then Harry turned and looked at him, and there was something in those green eyes that was not anger exactly, it was more specific than anger. It was the look of someone who had just found the shape of a problem they intended to solve. Is this actionable? Harry asked, turning back to Ragnarok. Gringotts does not involve itself in wizarding law, Ragnarok said. However. He paused with the precision of a being who understood the weight of the word. Gringotts does involve itself in the security and rightful distribution of assets held in our vaults. These assets are our responsibility. Their unauthorized transfer is, his jaw moved slightly. A matter we take seriously. Good, Harry said. Then I'd like to formally request that all trust instruments associated with my accounts be reviewed. Any access not authorized directly by me should be flagged and held. Can you freeze further unauthorized transfers? Immediately, Ragnarok said, with a satisfaction that suggested he had been waiting for exactly this instruction. There will also need to be a formal vault audit. Given the number of houses involved, and the ages of some of the vaults, it is a significant undertaking. Schedule it, Harry said. I'll come back to complete it when the school year allows. Ragnarok looked at him for a moment. You are 11 years old, he said. Not skeptically, more like a scientist noting a variable. Yes, Harry said. Most wizards of 11 who come to Gringotts are accompanied by an adult who speaks for them, Ragnarok said. Harry glanced at Geralt. There was a half-second of something between them, a private shorthand accumulated over 6 years, and then Harry looked back. He's not here to speak for me, Harry said, with a quiet, uncomplicated clarity. He's here because he's family. Geralt had heard that word before. In various contexts, from various people, applied to him. It had never previously landed the way it landed now, in a goblin bank's inheritance chamber, stated as a simple fact by an 11-year-old who had apparently decided it was true and saw no reason to perform uncertainty about it. He said nothing. He was aware of saying nothing very loudly. Ragnarok looked between them. Something in his expression had the quality of respect given to a specific kind of person, the kind who walks into a room and handles what's there without theatrics. We will also, Ragnarok said, need to discuss the matter of your lordship rings. Harry looked up. Plural. 20 houses, Ragnarok said. As the recognized heir, and in several cases the last living heir, you hold formal lordship rights in houses that have been without a recognized lord for some time. Some of them carry seats on the Wisengamot. He paused. The political implications are significant, Harry said. To phrase it carefully, Ragnarok said. Harry was quiet for a moment. Then, can the rings wait? I'd like to take them with me when I have time to understand what I'm taking. He looked at Ragnarok steadily. I don't want to claim something I don't understand yet. Ragnarok regarded him with an expression that was, for a goblin, practically warm. They will be held in your primary vault, he said. Ready when you are. They went down in the carts, Harry's first time, and he held the front rail and leaned into the drop with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of someone who had once spent 3 days riding down the Yaruga Rapids on a wooden raft for reasons that had seemed logical at the time. Gerald held on to his swords. The Potter vault was old and large, and the second Ragnarok unsealed the door. Harry stepped in and stood still for a moment, breathing the cool medallion stone air of it. It was not just coins. There were books, shelves of them, old and leather-bound. There were objects whose magical signatures made Harry's medallion hum with quiet interest. There were framed portraits of people with dark hair and varying shades of hazel and green eyes looking out from their frames with expressions that, in at least 2 cases, looked immediately back at Harry and said nothing but were clearly saying a great deal. Harry looked at the portraits for a moment. Later, he told them, and they nodded, with the solemn grace of people who had been waiting a long time and could manage a little longer. He took what he needed for supplies, a very small portion of the actual total, which was still more than enough and then some, and left the rest. Back in the cart, going up, the wind of motion in their faces, Harry said, "Lucius Malfoy." "I heard," Geralt said. "I don't know who he is yet," Harry said. "But I'm going to find out exactly who he is and exactly what he took and exactly what I'm going to do about it." "Not today," Geralt said. "No," Harry agreed. "Not today. But eventually." He looked at the rushing stone walls. "And I'm not going to make a fuss about it in the meantime. I'm not going to announce that I know. I'm just going to," he paused, finding the word. "Prepare." "That," Geralt said, "is the right approach." "It's what you do," Harry said. Which was, Geralt thought, accurate. The supplies took most of the afternoon. Harry moved through Diagon Alley with the efficient pleasure of someone with a list and a coin to complete it, and Geralt walked alongside him with the particular quality of presence that cleared paths without requiring anyone to understand why they were stepping aside. The bookshop was the longest stop. Harry went through the required list in 10 minutes and then spent 40 more in the history and theory sections, pulling things down and reading the first chapter standing in the aisle and either putting them back or adding them to the growing stack under his arm. The proprietor watched this with increasing awe. "He reads fast," the man said to Geralt, in the tone of someone who wasn't entirely sure what they were witnessing. "He reads everything," Geralt said. The robes were easy. The cauldron, Harry picked the pewter standard, examined it, then asked to see the silver core reinforced version and inspected the construction with the familiarity of someone who had brewed in field conditions and had opinions about structural integrity. He chose the good one. The dragon hide gloves he held up to the light, tested the finger joints, pressed the palm with his thumb to feel the density. "This is Hungarian horntail," he said to the glove maker. The man blinked. "It is, yes." "How did you, the scale pattern," Harry said. "And the coloring. Do you have common Welsh green? The joint flexibility is better." The man had common Welsh green. They were not in the standard display. He got them out. Harry tried them on, flexed his fingers twice, nodded. "These." Ollivander's was last. The shop was quiet and strange and the air inside had the particular compressed electricity quality of concentrated wand wood and core material, and Harry's medallion began to hum the moment the door closed behind them. He stood in it for a moment, head slightly tilted, listening. Ollivander himself appeared from the dim back of the shop with the quality of someone who had materialized rather than walked, and he looked at Harry with eyes that were pale and very sharp. "I wondered," Ollivander said, "when you would come." He stopped in front of Harry. "Harry Potter." Or, he paused, his head tilting. "No. Something more than that. Much more." He looked at him in silence for a moment. "You have been through interesting things, young man." "A few," Harry said. "Your magical signature is," Ollivander seemed to be listening to something. "Layered. Complex. There are signs here I recognize and structures I do not." He looked at Harry's right arm. "You have a wand holster but no wand." "I've been using signs," Harry said. "Witcher magic. It works differently." Ollivander blinked. "Witcher," he stopped. Looked at Geralt. Really looked, the way people sometimes didn't, taking in the swords and the yellow eyes and the medallion and the particular quality of stillness that witchers had. "Ah," he said, very quietly. "I see." He began pulling boxes. The measuring tape did its thing. Harry watched it with mild curiosity rather than the wide-eyed fascination it was accustomed to generating, and Ollivander started the process of finding the wand. It was not a quick process. It was not usually, with powerful children, and Harry was doing something none of the others did, which was that he picked up each wand and instead of simply waving it or waiting for a reaction, he held it in his right hand, closed his eyes for half a second, and listened. "You're feeling for the core," Ollivander said, watching him. "And the wood," Harry said, putting down a wand with a slight shake of his head. "I'm trying to find the one that fits both systems. The signs use the same channels as wand work, I think. I need something that can handle both." Ollivander was very still. "That is a remarkable thing to understand about yourself." "It's logic," Harry said, accepting the next wand. "The magical system I've trained in uses specific hand gestures and intent focus. Wands channel magical will through a paired medium. They should be compatible. The question is whether a standard wand is too narrow." He held this one. "Put it down. This one is too rigid." "Too rigid," Ollivander repeated. "The core is powerful but inflexible," Harry said. "I need flexibility. Something that can respond quickly to a changing intent rather than requiring careful aim." He tried 11 more wands. Ollivander, who had been growing progressively more interested, disappeared into the back and returned with a box that was different from the others, older, dustier, set aside from the main stock. "This was made somewhat differently," Ollivander said. "I wasn't certain it would ever suit anyone." He opened it. Holly. 11 inches. Supple. The core was phoenix feather, a single feather from a specific bird, Ollivander said, a bird that had only ever given one other feather, and that feather had made the wand that gave me this scar, Harry said, looking at it. Ollivander stopped. "I know about Voldemort," Harry said, in the same tone he'd used to say he knew about drowners. "Not afraid. Just informed." He picked up the wand. The warmth came immediately, not explosive, not the shower of sparks that Wandlore tales described, but something deeper. A resonance, low and genuine, like a string played at the exact right tension, finding a note that hung in the air and didn't dissolve. The medallion sang. Harry's other hand came up, apparently reflexively, and he made the shape of an odd sign with it, precise, practiced, and the air in the shop moved, not destructively, just a breath of it, responsive and smooth. "Ah," Ollivander said softly. "Yes," Harry said, with satisfaction. He turned the wand in his hand. 11 inches. Supple. The flexibility he'd asked for. "The twin cores," Ollivander said quietly. It is not a comfortable thing, in the lore. A wand that shares a core with another is sometimes said to know its brother. To refuse to act against it. "I know," Harry said. "But I'm not planning to fight Voldemort with the wand he used to kill my parents." He looked at Ollivander steadily. "I'll make him wish I had." Ollivander looked at this 11-year-old for a long moment. Then he said, 7 galleons. On the street outside, Harry turned the wand once more in his fingers and then slid it into the holster with the practiced ease of someone who had been putting blades away for years. It sat there alongside the signs, alongside the 6 years of the path, alongside everything Geralt had built into him and everything he'd built himself. "Well," Harry said. He was looking at the alley, the crowds, the ordinary chaos of the wizarding world going about its business entirely unaware that Harry Potter had spent the morning discovering he was heir to 20 great houses and the afternoon choosing the most significant wand in British wizarding history. "How do you feel?" Geralt asked. Harry considered this honestly. "Like the board just got a lot bigger," he said. "But I know how to play." "Do you?" "I'll learn," Harry said, with the same matter-of-fact ease he'd said okay to a list of things that would take years. "I always do." He shifted his supply bags. Can we get food? I haven't eaten since the train. There's a pub back through the leaky cauldron, Geralt said. Good, Harry said, already moving. And I want to talk about Lucius Malfoy. What I know, what I don't know, what I need to find out. After food, Geralt said. During food, Harry said. They went back through the archway, through the leaky cauldron, into the warm evening streets of London, and behind them in Gringotts, Ragnarok was already making 3 separate memos, one to the Vault Audit Department, one to the legal team, and one to himself, which simply read, "The heir of 20 houses has been found." He came alone, he was not afraid, and he knew more about Gringotts banking law than most adult wizards. Watch this one. And somewhere in Wiltshire, in a manor that had been in the Malfoy family for 4 centuries, a fireplace went green and a message arrived from a source inside Gringotts, and Lucius Malfoy read it twice. He set it down. He looked at the fire for a long time. Then he called for his solicitor, and began thinking very carefully about what came next. Chapter 4, The Sorting of the Heir. The Hogwarts Express left King's Cross at 11 o'clock on the 1st of September, and Harry was on it by 10:40, which meant he had time to find a compartment, stow his trunk, and watch the platform fill up with the particular chaotic energy of families saying goodbye. He watched through the window with the observational detachment of someone cataloging a new environment. The patterns were immediately readable, the old families clustered in specific ways, comfortable with the crowds, the children confident in the manner of people who knew where they were going and who their people were. The first-generation wizarding families bunched nearer the doors, excited and slightly overwhelmed, parents in muggle clothes holding letters and looking at the train like it might change its mind about taking their children. He noted, specifically, a blond boy near the far end of the platform. Expensive robes, expensive luggage, posture that had been trained into him, straight back, chin up, the particular performance of someone who had been taught that they were important and that others should register this. 2 large boys behind him in the manner of furniture. A man beside him who shared the bone structure but had it arranged more carefully, more controlled, with pale eyes that moved across the platform in a way that had nothing to do with sentiment and everything to do with assessment. Lucius Malfoy. Harry looked at him for exactly as long as he needed to and then looked away. The door to his compartment opened and a girl came in with bushy brown hair, a large book under one arm, and the expression of someone who had already decided to make the best of every available moment. "Is this seat taken?" she asked. "No," Harry said. She sat down, opened her book, and began reading. Harry watched this with approval. She made it 2 pages before looking up. "I'm Hermione Granger," she said, with the energy of someone who had been holding that in. "Harry Potter." She stared at him for half a second, the reflex, he recognized, of someone who knew that name and was recalibrating. To her credit, she pushed through it in about 3 seconds flat. "You weren't at any of the introductory events," she said. "Most Muggle-raised students went to the summer orientation." "I've been on the continent," Harry said. She considered this. "Doing what?" "Working," Harry said. She looked at him, taking in the road-worn traveling clothes he'd changed out of and back into because they were comfortable, the holster on his forearm, the way he was sitting, which was upright but not the trained upright of the blond boy on the platform, the upright of someone who expected to need to move quickly. "What kind of work?" she asked. "Monster hunting," Harry said. "A beat." "That's a real profession," she said, not skeptically but with the tone of someone cross-referencing internally. "Witcher," Harry said. "Specifically." Her eyes went wide. "I've read about Witchers. They're from the continent. Another world, technically, a connected world, alternate dimensional." She stopped herself. "Sorry. I research things." "Don't apologize for it," Harry said. She looked at him. "Most people find it annoying." "Most people are wrong about a lot of things," Harry said, which made her laugh, a short, startled laugh, genuine and bright. "Did you actually hunt monsters?" she said. "Yes." "What kind?" "Neckers, drowners, wraiths, one particularly bad rot-fiend outside Oxenford, 2 wyverns, he stopped. The wyverns were a complicated contract. She was staring at him again. You're 11, she said. The rot-fiend was when I was 10, Harry agreed. The compartment door opened again and a round-faced boy almost fell in, looking flustered and apologetic in advance of anything happening. Sorry, is there room? Everywhere else is. Sit down, Harry said. The boy sat, relieved. He had a broad, earnest face and the particular quality of someone who had been told they were bad at things so often they'd started believing it structurally. He was also carrying a toad. Neville Longbottom, he said. Sorry. I dropped Trevor earlier and I've been, he held up the toad. Harry Potter. Hermione Granger, Harry said. The toad is fine. Neville blinked at the name. Did the same 3-second recalibration as Hermione, then settled. Are you really? Yes, Harry said. Let's move past it. Neville nodded, apparently grateful for the instruction. He settled Trevor in his hands and looked around the compartment. Is it true, he said quietly, that it's very difficult? Hogwarts? Some of it probably is, Harry said. What are you worried about specifically? Neville looked surprised to be asked. Magic, he said. I'm not, my family says I'm not very strong. They couldn't tell if I was magical at all until I fell out a window and bounced. Bounced, Hermione said. 8 stories, Neville said, with a kind of impressed resignation. So I have magic. I just can't always make it do things on purpose. Harry looked at him steadily. Do you practice? Not much. My gran thinks I should focus on core theory before, practice more, Harry said. Theory is useful. Actual repetition is how the pathways form. Especially wand work, you have to build the connection physically before the theory makes sense of it. He paused. What's your wand? Neville pulled it out. Harry took it when it was offered, holding it with the same listening stillness he'd used in Ollivander's, and nodded. It's not yours, he said, handing it back. It was my dad's, Neville said, quietly. It's fighting you, Harry said. Every time you cast, it's partially your intent and partially your father's residual signature. It's like, he looked for a comparison. Like fighting with someone else's grip on your sword. You can do it, but it costs you twice as much energy and the precision suffers. Neville stared at him. How do you know that? I know what it feels like when a magical instrument is tuned to someone else, Harry said. You need your own wand. He paused. And you're not weak. You caught a toad that didn't want to be caught, navigated an entire train, and sat down in a compartment with 2 strangers without your magic doing anything unexpected. That's control. Quiet control. You just don't recognize it as control yet. Neville was looking at him with an expression that suggested no one had ever said anything quite like that to him before. Hermione was looking at Harry with an expression that suggested she was filing something. How do you know all that about wand work? She asked. You said you've been on the continent. Do they use wands there? Signs, Harry said. Witcher magic, gestural, intent-based. The underlying mechanics overlap with wand theory but the delivery system is different. I've been thinking about how they interact. He looked at his own wand holster. I got my wand a month ago. I've been working out the relationship. Can I ask? She stopped. What signs can you do? He held up his right hand and made the R gesture, precise, restrained, and the book on the seat beside Hermione slid 2 inches to the left. Telekinetic force, she said immediately. That's not in any standard curriculum. No, Harry said. Can you teach me? She said, with the directness of someone for whom the question was obvious. If you want, Harry said. She opened her book to a new page. I want, she said firmly. Hogwarts came into view at dusk, across the Black Lake, its towers lit against a sky that had committed fully to the theatrical and was doing northern stars and cloud banks around a three-quarter moon. The boats crossed the glassy water in silence except for first-year breathing, which was doing the specific thing of people trying to be normal in the presence of something that made normality inadequate. Harry looked at the castle. At the towers, the lights, the particular deep magic that the medallion was registering as old and layered and enormous, foundation spells wound through the stone itself, protective and purposeful, centuries of accumulated magical intent. "It's incredible," Hermione murmured, from the boat beside his. "It is," Harry said. "Are you nervous?" Neville asked, from his other side. Harry considered this honestly. "No," he said. "You?" "Yes," Neville said, then looked slightly surprised at having admitted it. "That's fine," Harry said. "Nervous means you care about getting it right." Neville looked at him sideways. "You sound like a teacher." "I had a good one," Harry said. Professor McGonagall met them at the entrance with the crisp authority of someone who had been doing this for decades and found no diminishment in its importance. She had the look of a person whose standards were fixed points around which other things arranged themselves, and Harry looked at her with the instinctive professional respect he gave competent people doing their jobs well. She gave the speech about the sorting in houses, and it was clear from the way she delivered it that she was assessing them as she went, not consciously, not cruelly, just the practiced eye of a woman who had been reading incoming first years for 30 years. Her gaze passed over Harry and stopped for a fraction of a second, the way a compass needle hesitates before finding north. He looked back, steady and uncomplicated. She moved on. The great hall was precisely as the books had described and entirely more than the books had conveyed, for long tables, hundreds of candles in open air, the bewitched ceiling doing the late sky outside with total conviction, the assembled school looking at the incoming first years with the spectrum of expressions ranging from nostalgic to bored to acutely competitive. Harry scanned the hall the way he scanned every new location. Exits. Sightlines. Concentrations of power, the head table, obviously, with its collection of adult magical signatures, including one that was very powerful and very controlled and very old, which would be Dumbledore, and one that was cold and carefully contained like banked coals, which was a dark-haired man in black robes at the end of the table who was looking at the incoming first years with the expression of a person counting down until an obligation was complete. That gaze stopped on Harry with the particular quality of a man recognizing something he hadn't expected. Severus Snape. Harry had done enough reading. He met Snape's gaze for a moment, neither defiant nor deferential, just present and attentive. Snape looked away first. The Sorting Hat sat on its stool and sang its song, and Harry listened to it with genuine interest. It was an old intelligence, bound and long settled into its purpose, the magic in it having the layered quality of something built over centuries rather than cast, and when the song finished and the names began, he filed what he'd heard and waited. Granger, Hermione, Gryffindor, after the briefest pause, the hat barely on her head before calling it. Longbottom, Neville, Gryffindor, slower, the hat sitting for a moment on Neville's head while the boy went very still. Then the call came and Neville let out a breath like he'd been holding it since August. Malfoy, Draco, Slytherin, immediately, the hat still settling on blonde hair when it announced it. The table erupted in applause with the practiced enthusiasm of a house that considered this result inevitable. Potter, Harry. The hall went very quiet. Harry walked to the stool and sat down, and the hat came down over his eyes, and the inside of it was nothing, and then it was a voice, dry and immeasurably old, in the space directly behind his thoughts. "Well," said the hat. "This is unusual." "Is it?" Harry said, which was not a question. "I don't normally encounter minds that have been, how to phrase it, professionally arranged." "You think like someone who has spent years cataloging hostile environments." "I have," Harry said. "Yes." A pause that felt like reading. 6 years of the path. A witcher's training. Signs, potions, field craft. And underneath all that, the hat went somewhere deeper, and Harry felt it, not intrusive exactly but deliberate, the way a practitioner tests the strength of something by pressing. "Oh. Oh, that's interesting. That's very old, some of that. The Peveril line alone, the 20 houses thing, Harry said. Yes, I know. You know, the hat said. You're remarkably calm about it. I've had a month to think about it, Harry said. And I grew up learning that what matters is what you do with what you have, not what you have. A Witcher's philosophy, the hat said. My own, Harry said. Another pause. Where to put you? Slytherin would use you well. The cunning is there, the strategic thinking, yes. But you don't want power for its own sake. Ravenclaw has appeal, the mind is exceptional, no question, but it's not where you're going. Not primarily. A longer pause. Gryffindor. It keeps presenting itself. Not because you're reckless, you're not, you're actually the least reckless first year I've had in some time, but because the core of it, the thing you'd walk into fire for, is people. Specific people. The ones you've decided to stand for. A beat. That's a Gryffindor quality. The finest kind. Then we agree, Harry said. Yes, the hat said. Though I should tell you, you could have argued with me. I've had very few students who could. I know, Harry said. But you're right. Gryffindor, the hat announced. The Gryffindor table erupted. Harry lifted the hat, set it back on the stool, and walked to the table with the same unhurried directness he'd applied to everything else. The cheering was loud. He sat down beside Hermione, who had saved him a seat without being asked. Well, she said. Gryffindor, he said. Obviously, she said. Obviously, he agreed. From the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy was watching him with the measuring expression of someone reassessing a calculation. Harry was aware of it without looking. He'd been aware of Draco Malfoy since the platform, catalogued him efficiently, the performance of importance over actual capability, the need for his father's name as scaffolding, and set him aside as a minor variable. He was more interested in Snape, who was watching Harry from the head table with something complicated moving behind carefully still eyes. Potions was the first real test, and Snape administered it in the way of someone who had been waiting for it. The dungeon classroom was cold and purposeful and smelled of things that were interesting and things that were not, and Snape entered it with a billowing authority that was, Harry assessed quickly, genuine rather than performed. He knew his subject. He knew it the way Geralt knew swords, in the body, in the reflex, not just in the mind. Mr. Potter, Snape said, before anyone had fully settled. Our new celebrity. His voice was silky and precise, the tone of someone who had found a use for condescension and was deploying it surgically. Professor Snape, Harry said, evenly. Perhaps Mr. Potter can tell us what we would get if we added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood. The class went still. Harry looked at him. Not with the deer-in torchlight quality of someone whose bluff was being called, but with the expression of someone who had just been asked a question. Draught of living death, Harry said. Asphodel in wormwood forms the base. It's one of the most powerful sleeping potions known, classified as highly dangerous due to the difficulty of calibrating dosage. The margin between a sleep state and a permanent one is narrow enough that it's been misused as a poison in documented cases. The difficulty is in the wormwood preparation. You need to extract the active compounds without oxidizing them, which requires cold maceration rather than heat, and the timing is critical within about a 30-second window or the potency degrades significantly. He paused. The continent variant uses a slightly different wormwood species that's more forgiving on the timing but less potent overall. Silence. Snape's expression had done something very brief and very controlled. Where would you look if I asked you to find me a bezoar? Stomach of a goat, Harry said. I've used them. On the continent, their standard field kit, most potion-based toxins can be neutralized or slowed enough to treat. You want a fresh one over 6 months old if you can get it. He paused. Though the shelf life is actually somewhat debated in the continent literature, Geralt of Rivia's field notes suggest up to 8 months with proper drying, but I've seen a closer margin in practice. Snape looked at him for a long moment. The class had the quality of a room in which everyone was holding their breath. Monkshood and wolfsbane, Snape said. What is the difference? There isn't one, Harry said. Same plant. Aconitum. Also called aconite. It's used in wolfsbane potion, which I've read is a recent development, suppresses werewolf transformation without eliminating it. The active compound interacts with the magical component of lycanthropy rather than the physical, which is why Muggle treatments don't work. He stopped. Though I'd want to review the ingredient ratios, the existing formula has some inefficiencies in the stabilization phase that look addressable. Snape was still. It seems, he said, after a moment, you have not opened the standard textbook. I have, Harry said. I found it incomplete in several areas. From 2 seats away, Hermione was making a very specific expression, the one that meant she was experiencing both academic solidarity and something like exasperated admiration. Have you? Snape said. The section on Wiggenweld potion is missing the interaction with Dittany entirely, Harry said. And the chapter on base preparations doesn't address temperature variance. It's a beginner text, so I understand the simplification, but the simplification creates bad habits in the timing that would cause problems at any WT level. Snape looked at him for a long, measuring moment. Harry looked back. Not challenging. Not performing confidence. Just stating what he thought was true. 10 points to Gryffindor, Snape said finally, in the tone of someone paying a debt they find irritating. Try not to make a habit of knowing things I haven't taught you. I don't think I can promise that, Harry said honestly. The class made a sound. Snape's expression moved somewhere briefly that might, in someone else, have been the ghost of amusement. Then it closed back down. Pair up. We are brewing a simple boil cure potion. Instructions are on the board. Try not to melt anything. The days developed shape quickly. Classes, the texture of Hogwarts, the particular alchemy of finding how people moved around each other in an enclosed space. Charms was Flitwick, who was small and bright-eyed and competent, and who watched Harry's first Wingardium Leviosa with an expression of professional surprise. The feather not only rose but held, motionless and precise, at exactly the height indicated, with none of the wavering that characterized most first-year attempts. Very good, Mr. Potter, Flitwick said. Very controlled. Signs are similar, Harry said. Same channel. Different delivery. Could you demonstrate the sign equivalent? Flitwick asked, with the transparent excitement of a specialist encountering something outside his specialty. Harry made the odd gesture. Small, controlled, barely any force behind it. Just enough to move the feather. Flitwick actually bounced slightly. He was a very honest reactor to interesting things, which Harry appreciated. Remarkable. The intent structure is, could I ask you to come by office hours? I have some questions. Yes, Harry said. Flitwick beamed. Defense against the dark arts was Quirrell, and Harry registered him on the second step into the classroom. Not the stutter. Not the nervous, apologetic manner. Those were readable and registered and set aside. What Harry registered was underneath, the particular quality of a presence that was doubled, that contained something behind the performance, something cold and purposeful that wore Quirrell's anxiety like a coat. The medallion went still and focused in the way it did near something specific, not monsters exactly, something stranger, a signature that was damaged and displaced and immensely, dangerously powerful. He said nothing. He sat down. He listened through the class with the careful attention of someone who has identified a threat and is building a picture. After, in the corridor, Hermione, he said, quietly. I know, she said, just as quietly. He looked at her. There's something wrong with him, she said. I noticed it too. His aura, I've been reading about magical aura reading, it's advanced but the principle is, something is riding him, Harry said. Inside, behind the performance. I don't know what yet. Voldemort, she said, with the directness of someone who decided not to be afraid of the name. Maybe, Harry said. I don't have enough information. What do we do? We watch, Harry said. We learn. We build an accurate picture before we move. She nodded. Like a contract. He looked at her. Exactly like a contract. From down the corridor, Neville came around the corner, slightly out of breath. There you two are. Ron Weasley says there's a troll. No, sorry, that's next month, I read ahead. He paused. What are we talking about? Quirrell, Harry said. Neville stopped. I thought he seemed wrong, Harry said. Yes. Don't say anything to anyone. Just be aware. Neville nodded, with the particular look he sometimes had of someone who had been told they were useless for so long that being included in serious information was itself a new calibration. The letter from Gerald came at the end of the second week, delivered by a large, very serious raven that declined Trevor's proximity with magnificent disdain. Harry opened it at the Gryffindor table over breakfast. 3 sentences. The Malfoy solicitor's former office wasn't entirely closed. Ragnarok has a name. Don't do anything until you hear more. Harry read it twice. Then put it in his pocket and finished breakfast. Good news? Hermione asked. Progress, Harry said. On the vault situation? She looked at him for a moment. Are you going to tell me about it properly at some point? At some point, Harry said. When I have the full picture. I could help, she said, not complainingly. Just noting the option. I know you could, Harry said. That's why I'll tell you when it's time. This apparently satisfied her, because she went back to her toast. The one moment that could have been a scene, the moment that others would have made into one, came on the 3rd Friday. Draco Malfoy found Harry in the corridor outside the library with 2 of his large furniture friends and the particular manner of someone who had decided a thing was going to happen. Potter, he said. I've been meaning to speak to you. Harry stopped and looked at him with the complete attention of someone who has stopped what they were doing to assess something. I know about Gringotts, Draco said, more quietly. The confidence was still there, but it was working harder than it wanted to be. I know you went. I know what they found. Do you? Harry said. My father, he stopped. Started again, less smoothly. My father says you should be careful about making enemies you don't understand. Harry looked at him for a long moment. Your father, he said, with a precision that was not threatening and did not need to be, should be careful about the same thing. A silence. That's a threat, Draco said. It's a fact, Harry said. There's a difference. A threat implies uncertainty about the outcome. He held Draco's gaze for another second. I'm not uncertain. He walked around him and into the library. Draco stood in the corridor with his furniture friends and the particular quality of someone whose script had just been discarded and who was now trying to improvise in a language they didn't know well. Inside the library, Harry found the table where Hermione had claimed about 6 square feet of research space, and sat down, and opened his transfiguration notes. That took longer than expected, Hermione said, without looking up. Library was busy, Harry said. She said, in the tone of someone who had a very accurate idea of what had actually happened. Outside the window, Hogwarts went on in its vast, old, purposeful way. The candles burned. The staircases moved. The paintings whispered to each other in the walls. And in the deepest part of the castle, past the 3rd-floor corridor that Professor Dumbledore had noted was out of bounds, something sat and waited, patient and cold and very nearly complete. Harry turned a page. Made a note. Looked up at the ceiling for a moment, thinking, then looked back down. There was a great deal still to understand. He intended to understand all of it. Chapter 5, What Lives in the Dark October arrived in Hogwarts the way it always did, decisively, with wind and color and the particular smell of wood smoke that made the castle feel like a thing that had been waiting for the cold to come back. Harry had been at Hogwarts for 6 weeks and had, in that time, developed a thorough map of the castle, not metaphorically, but literally, a hand-drawn chart in the back of one of his notebooks, updated every time he found a new passage or a staircase that changed when it felt like it. He'd located 7 exits that weren't the main doors, 2 secret passages that the map in the library didn't include, and 1 room on the 5th floor that appeared to want to be a classroom but kept rearranging itself, which he'd noted and left alone for the moment. He'd also been watching Quirrell. The defense professor's double quality was not getting easier to look at. If anything, it was becoming more distinct, the gap between the performance and the thing behind it widening as the weeks went on, as if whatever was inside was having difficulty remaining contained. The medallion registered at every lesson, that cold, focused pulse, not monstrous exactly but other. Wrong. A will that was not Quirrell's operating Quirrell's body with increasing impatience. In the library, on a grey Wednesday afternoon with rain doing something committed against the windows, Harry spread his notes across the table and looked at what he had. Quirrell, possessed or occupied or some wizarding equivalent. The cold signature behind his was powerful and displaced. Partial. Like something that had been mostly destroyed and was regenerating. The 3rd floor corridor, sealed, warded, out of bounds. Standard castle wards on most of Hogwarts, but the 3rd floor had something additional, something layered on recently, in the last year. A dog, according to a Hufflepuff second year who'd accidentally opened the door. A very large dog. Harry had filed this with interest. Fluffy, the second year had called it, which suggested Hagrid, who named everything with the affectionate irrationality of someone who saw a dragon and thought, small. And then, 3 weeks ago, Hermione had found it. She'd been doing research for something else entirely, following a thread about ancient protective magics for an extra credit essay she was writing because she was writing every extra credit essay, and had come across a reference that connected the Philosopher's Stone to Nicholas Flamel, and from Flamel to a vault robbery at Gringotts over the summer that had been in the Daily Prophet, and from that to Dumbledore. And then she'd looked up from her notes with the expression of someone whose research had just handed them something much larger than they'd been looking for. Harry had read her notes. Then read the relevant sources himself. Then sat with it for 2 days. The stone was in Hogwarts. In the 3rd floor corridor, past the dog, past whatever else Dumbledore had constructed as protection, because Gringotts had been robbed of the vault that previously held it and Dumbledore had moved it somewhere he thought was safer. The thing in Quirrell wanted the stone. The thing in Quirrell was, Harry was now fairly certain, what was left of Voldemort. Not a full presence. A fragment, a remnant, something that had survived the night in Godric's Hollow as a reduced and desperate thing clinging to existence. Looking for a way back. Looking for a body, a foothold, anything that would begin the process of returning. The Philosopher's Stone made you immortal. Nicholas Flamel's centuries of life were the standing proof. It was a straightforward contract, when you laid it out. He was telling Hermione and Neville today. They found an empty classroom on the 3rd floor, not the 3rd floor corridor, but a disused room 2 turnings away with a broken desk in the corner and windows that looked out over the lake. Hermione arrived first and immediately used a cleaning charm on the desk, out of pure reflex. Neville came in slightly out of breath, having apparently been waylaid by his own toad again. Harry closed the door, turned around, and laid it out. No preamble, no softening, just the facts in order, what he'd observed about Quirrell, what Hermione had found about the stone, what he understood about what was in Quirrell and what it wanted. When he finished, the room was quiet except for rain. Voldemort, Neville said. Not loudly. The word sat in his mouth differently than it did for most people, with a weight that was personal and old. His parents were in St. Mungo's. Had been since the night Voldemort fell. You're saying Voldemort is in Quirrell's head. What's left of him, Harry said. Something reduced. Something that needs the stone to return properly. Neville looked at the window. His jaw was tight. I knew something was wrong with Quirrell, he said, quietly. He makes me feel, he stopped. Cold, Harry said. Like something looking at you from very far away. Yes, Neville said. Hermione had been processing with the focused efficiency of someone who was also cross-referencing a great deal internally. If whatever Voldemort is gets the stone, he regains a body. Full power. And the Death Eaters who are still free, there are still some free, Lucius Malfoy among them, they were never prosecuted, I know, Harry said. Then they have their lord back. She looked at him. Harry. This is not a first-year problem. No, Harry said. We should tell Dumbledore, she said. We should, Harry said. And I will. But I want to understand the full picture first. The protections below the trapdoor, what they are, how many, whether there are any gaps. I want to know what we're looking at before we hand it to someone else and trust them to handle it. She looked at him for a moment. Why do you qualify it like that? Trust them to handle it. Because Dumbledore put the stone in a school full of children, Harry said. He set protections that he apparently thought were adequate. He is also, he paused. He's been managing my affairs without my knowledge for 11 years. He's the one who left me with the Dursleys. He makes decisions about other people's lives without consulting them and calls it wisdom. Silence. That's fair, Hermione said, slowly. I'm not saying he's wrong about everything, Harry said. I'm saying he has a pattern of deciding what's best for people and acting on it unilaterally, and I'd like to have complete information before I hand him the opportunity to decide what's best for me again. Neville was looking at him with a steady, thoughtful expression. What do you want to do? Map the protections, Harry said. From a safe distance. Then we decide together. The Forbidden Forest was not, technically, part of the mapping plan. It became part of the mapping plan on a Thursday evening in mid-October when Harry was returning from Hagrid's. He developed an uncomplicated friendship with the groundskeeper, based largely on their mutual interest in dangerous creatures and Hagrid's willingness to make tea at almost any hour, and he found a trail of something at the forest's edge that stopped him dead. Not footprints. Burned grass in a pattern, not fire damage, something more deliberate. Symbols he recognized from the Gringotts inheritance test chamber, the old language that Ragnarok's second goblin had been reading over his shoulder. House Peveril symbols. 3 of them, overlapping, burned into the frost-stiffened ground as if someone had wanted to leave a message in a language they knew he would be starting to learn. He crouched over them. The medallion was doing the particular thing it did near old, constructed magic, a steady, intentional pulse. He looked at the forest. He went in. The Forbidden Forest at night was not frightening. It was dark in the rich way of very old woodland, dense canopy, root-interrupted ground, the smell of pine and rot and something green and alive underneath. It was the kind of dark Harry had walked through on the continent for years, and his eyes, which had been supplemented by a low-level night vision draft he took regularly because night contracts were a practical reality, adjusted within seconds. He moved quietly. He moved the way Gerald had taught him, weight forward, heel-toe, reading the ground ahead before trusting it, listening in the full spectrum rather than just the auditory range. What he found, 20 minutes in, was a clearing with a unicorn. Specifically, a unicorn that was dying. Silver blood, literal silver, luminous in the dark, pooling from wounds in its side. Something had been at it. Something that moved on 2 legs, from the disturbance in the ground, but dragged itself rather than walked. Dragged itself. The medallion went absolutely cold and fixed. He had enough time to register the figure at the far edge of the clearing, hooded, crouched over the fallen unicorn, feeding, before it looked up and he saw the face of Quirrell, and behind Quirrell's face something else, something that was looking out of the eyes with a directness and intelligence that had nothing to do with the nervous professor. It saw him. Harry stood at the edge of the clearing with his wand already out, his offhand already in sign position, and looked at what looked back at him. "Harry Potter," said a voice that was not Quirrell's voice but was using Quirrell's mouth. "Thin and cold and very old. You are more than expected. You're less than expected, Harry said honestly. A pause. I remember you, the voice said. I remember that night. A child in a crib. I remember the house. I know what you did, Harry said. I know what you are. I know what you're after and why. He didn't move. And I know you're not whole. You're a fragment. Whatever you do here tonight is buying you weeks, maybe months, unicorn blood cursing whoever drinks it, you know that, it'll rot what you have left. So you're desperate. You're taking shortcuts. He looked at it steadily. That's not the position of something I need to be afraid of. The thing in Quirrell went very still. Then Quirrell stood up and the hooded figure fell away and there was nothing of the professor in the face anymore, only the thing behind it, looking out with those flat, fixed eyes. You have 6 years of a monster hunter's training, the voice said. You have unusual power. You are, interesting. A pause. Join me. The 20 houses, the stone, what I can restore, together, no, Harry said. Just that. Then I will kill you as I should have done 11 years ago. You can try, Harry said. Quirrell lunged. Harry moved left, not away, left, the direction that took him off the obvious line and toward the angle, which was the Witcher principle of engagement, always move to the angle, and cast Flipendo as a stopping measure, the knockback jinx hitting Quirrell in the chest hard enough to send him back 3 steps, which gave Harry the geometry he needed. Quirrell came again, faster, and there was magic behind it, not Quirrell's, the colder kind, thrown without a wand and radiating that particular bone-deep cold that Harry recognized now as something that had passed through his family once before. He threw an ard sign to meet it, force against force, and the collision in the air between them shook the trees. Close. That had been very close. Harry reassessed in the half-second he had. The thing was stronger than it appeared. The unicorn blood had done something, he could see the difference from earlier encounters with Quirrell's classroom presence. It was using Quirrell's body harder than before, burning through it, not caring about the cost. Tactically, Quirrell's body was the vulnerability. Not the thing inside it, but the vessel it was using. Damage the vessel and the thing had nowhere to operate from. Quirrell sent something dark and wordless at him and Harry dropped flat, real flat, continent style, face in the forest floor, and felt it pass over him, close enough that his hair moved. He rolled, came up in a crouch, and drove an Igni sign at the ground in front of Quirrell with the controlled precision he'd spent 2 years learning. Not at Quirrell. At the ground between them. Fire blooming up in a controlled line, not a wall exactly but a disruption, heat and light and the magical interference that fire created, it shattered the cold atmosphere of whatever Quirrell had been building, broke the working, bought him 2 seconds. He used them to think. He couldn't destroy the thing inside Quirrell. Not tonight, not like this, not without knowing more about what it was and what anchored it. Kill Quirrell and the thing would need a new host. Let it keep the unicorn blood and it would be stronger next time. What he could do was end the encounter. He reached into his bag, the small one, field kit, carried on habit, and found what he'd brought on an instinct he hadn't fully examined when he packed it. Moon dust. A small vial of it, continent-made, the silvery compound that dispersed possessing entities. He didn't know if it worked on wizarding fragments. He was about to find out. He uncorked it with his thumb and threw it. The effect was not what he expected. Not the clean dispersal he'd seen it do to wraiths. Instead it hit Quirrell and the man collapsed, not dead, his chest was still moving, but dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Quirrell's actual will suddenly unpin from whatever had been riding it. The thing inside screamed, not audibly, but in the medallion, a high cold spike that he felt in his back teeth. Then silence. Harry stood in a clearing with a wand in one hand and moon dust residue on the other and the fallen form of Quirrell between him and a dying unicorn, and he breathed for a moment. The thing was not gone. He could feel it, retreated, contracted, back in whatever corner of Quirrell it lived in but diminished, temporarily, driven back. The moon dust had cost it something. He looked at the unicorn. Still breathing, barely. The wounds were catastrophic. He knelt beside it and put one hand on the silver flank. Not healing, he didn't have the range for those wounds, but something. Presence. The gesture Geralt had taught him, because some things were about bearing witness, not about fixing. He stayed there until the breathing stopped. Then he stood up, looked at Quirrell's collapsed form, and made 3 decisions. He left Quirrell where he was. The man wasn't going anywhere, and whatever had been driving him was currently diminished enough to not be an immediate threat. He left the forest. He went directly to the Ollery, wrote a letter that was longer than Geralt's usual communication style but necessary, and sent it with the school's fastest post owl, which he tipped with an extra treat. Then he went to find Hermione and Neville. They met in the empty classroom on the 3rd floor at 11 at night, which was technically a rule violation that none of them acknowledged. Harry told them what had happened in the forest. He was concise and specific and accurate. When he finished, Hermione was pale but very still, the way she went when she was thinking hard through something frightening. Neville had a different kind of stillness, the kind of someone who has just had a theoretical threat become confirmed and real. Unicorn blood, Hermione said. He'll try again. The effect doesn't last, the curse gets into you, but the strength it gives you is temporary. He'll need more. Or he'll get the stone, Harry said. How long before he tries for it? I don't know, Harry said. The moon dust set him back. But it's not a permanent solution. So we need to understand the protections now, Neville said. Not a question. Not uncertainty. The flat, calm precision of a decision made. Harry looked at him. My parents are in St. Mungo's, Neville said, with the same quiet fact-based quality that Harry had used about the cupboard, about things that had been survived and set aside, because of him. Because of the people who served him. He met Harry's eyes. I'm not sitting in the dormitory while you go and look. I know, Harry said. Hermione opened her bag. I've been researching the standard protection types for high-security magical holdings, she said, pulling out notes. There are 7 documented layers used in combined protection schemes. Given that Dumbledore involved other teachers, I overheard Professor Flitwick and Professor McGonagall discussing it in October. Each layer is probably designed by a different caster. Which means each one reflects a different specialty. Harry looked at her notes. She'd color-coded them, which under other circumstances he'd have thought excessive and now thought was genuinely useful. Fluffy is Hagrid's, Harry said. Music. He told me himself, not about the 3rd floor specifically, but he mentioned once that Fluffy's the easiest thing in the world to manage if you know how. He'd catalogued this when Hagrid said it, filed it without comment. That's one, Hermione said. I think the others are, Devil's Snare, possibly, because Sprout's specialty. A logic puzzle Snape would find elegant. A flying challenge for Hooch, maybe, or something with broomwork. And something of Dumbledore's at the end. Flamel's stone would be the last thing before it, Harry said. Can we get past them? Neville asked. Yes, Harry said, without hesitation. The question is whether we need to. What do you mean? We go to Dumbledore, Harry said. We tell him what we know. What I saw in the forest. That Quirrell is Voldemort's host and that the timing is running out. He paused. But we go to him with the full picture in hand. So that when he makes a decision, we know whether his decision accounts for everything we know, and if he decides to do nothing or to handle it himself, we know what that means. And if he dismisses us, Hermione said. Then we handle it ourselves, Harry said. We're 11, Neville said. I know, Harry said. Right, Neville said, accepting this with the new steadiness that had been building in him over the weeks. Okay. Dumbledore's office was at the top of a spiral staircase behind a gargoyle that, when Harry spoke a password Hermione had researched, stepped aside with the indifferent cooperation of something that had been doing this for a very long time. The office was a circular room full of the accumulated evidence of a very long life, instruments, portraits, books, and a pervasive sense of someone who had been thinking about very large things for a very long time. Fawkes the Phoenix sat on his perch and looked at them with the calm appraisal of something genuinely ancient, and the medallion registered him as a warm, complex magical presence unlike anything Harry had encountered before. Dumbledore was behind his desk and he looked at them over his half-moon glasses with the expression of someone who is genuinely surprised and is deciding whether to be pleased about it. "Mr. Potter," he said. "Miss Granger. Mr. Longbottom. It is 11:30. "I know," Harry said. "I was in the Forbidden Forest earlier tonight. Professor Quirrell was there. He'd been drinking unicorn blood from a wounded unicorn." He held Dumbledore's gaze. "He's possessed. The entity inside him is what's left of Voldemort and it's been trying to get to the Philosopher's Stone you moved from Gringotts Vault 713. The room was very quiet. Dumbledore looked at Harry for a long moment. Behind the age and the deliberate gentleness there was something else, a sharpness, a very real intelligence that was now fully attending to this conversation. "You know about the stone," Dumbledore said. "Yes," Harry said. "How?" "Hermione found the Flamel reference and I followed the thread," Harry said. "The vault at Gringotts was robbed the same day Hagrid took me to retrieve something from Vault 713. The timing wasn't subtle." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. "And the forest?" "I found Peveril's symbols at the tree lean," Harry said. "Old magic. I followed them." He paused. "I engaged Quirrell. I had moon dust from the continent, it dispersed the possessing entity temporarily. It's diminished but not gone." "You engaged," Dumbledore stopped. Something moved across his face, not quite alarm, but a recalibration. "Are you hurt?" "No," Harry said. "The moon dust is a continent compound that disrupts possessing entities," Harry said. "I don't know how much time it bought. Maybe days. Maybe less." He looked at Dumbledore steadily. "I'm telling you now because I have the full picture and I thought you should have it. The stone needs to either be moved again or the protections need to be reinforced immediately." Dumbledore looked at him for a long time. The intelligence behind the half-moon glasses was doing something. Harry could read the shape of it, the processing, the updating of a large and complex model. He was also, Harry noticed, taking in all three of them. Not just Harry. Hermione's organized folder of notes on the desk. Neville's straight-backed, quiet presence. "Mr. Longbottom," Dumbledore said, gently. "I know who's in Quirrell," Neville said, with the same quiet precision he'd found recently. "I know what Voldemort did to my family. I'm not afraid of the name and I'm not going to be kept out of the conversation about it." Dumbledore was still for a moment. "No," he said, softly. "I don't suppose you are." He stood and moved to the window. Outside, the Hogwarts grounds were dark and windy and very real. "You are right," he said. "The stone must be moved. I had hoped," he stopped. "I had hoped the protections would be sufficient and that the situation could be managed over a longer time frame." He turned back. "I had hoped, also, that you would not be drawn into this during your first year. With respect," Harry said, "you put it in a school I attend, behind a door I walk past, with a teacher who is possessed by the entity that murdered my parents. I was always going to be drawn in." Dumbledore looked at him. Then, quietly, he said, "You sound like Geralt." Harry was still for a moment. "You know about him?" "I know more about your 6 years than you might expect," Dumbledore said, and there was something in the tone that was careful and measured and carrying weight it wasn't fully releasing. "I have been, watching over you, as best I could from this distance." "Watching," Harry said. "Yes." "From a distance." "Yes." A pause. "I know that the watching was not the same as the being there. I know that the distance had a cost." "The Dursleys had a cost," Harry said, with a flatness that was not anger exactly but was the distillate of something that had been settled a long time ago and was being stated as a fact, not a wound. I know why you put me there. The blood protection. My mother's sacrifice, the extension of it through her sister's household. I've read enough to understand the theory. He met Dumbledore's eyes. It was still wrong. However logical the theory, it was still wrong. Dumbledore held his gaze. Yes, he said, simply. It was. The admission was complete and unqualified, and it did something in the room, not dissolving the thing, not resolving years of something into nothing, but acknowledging its real shape. Okay, Harry said. Then we move forward from here with a different understanding. Dumbledore looked at him with an expression that was complex and genuine, and something that might have been the particular grief of someone seeing what something could have been. What understanding is that? He said. That you don't make decisions about my life without my knowledge, Harry said. That I'm not a piece on a board. That whatever the plan is for Voldemort, whatever the long game looks like, I'm not a variable in it, I'm a participant. With full information. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. Fawkes made a small sound on his perch, not a distress sound, something more like a gentle correction. That, Dumbledore said, finally, is an entirely reasonable request. And I find, looking at who you have become, that I would be both foolish and wrong to refuse it. Harry nodded once. Dumbledore looked at all three of them. The stone will be moved tonight. I will contact Nicholas myself before dawn. The protections will be maintained as they are. It would be more suspicious to dismantle them suddenly than to leave them intact while the stone is removed. He paused. As for Quirrell, that situation requires careful handling. He is still a staff member. The entity inside him, while diminished, is not defeated. I would ask, we won't tip him off, Harry said. I know, Dumbledore said. What I was going to ask is that you come to me if you observe further escalation. Before acting on it. Harry looked at him for a moment. If there's time. If there's time, Dumbledore agreed, accepting the qualifier with the grace of someone who recognized a non-negotiable condition. They were on the stairs, the gargoyle already resettling behind them, when Dumbledore called from above, Mr. Potter. Harry looked up. The old man stood at the top of the stairs, and in the light of the corridor he looked like what he was, someone very old who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time, and who was reconsidering the distribution of the weight. I knew your parents, he said. They would have found you, extraordinary. Harry looked at him for a moment. I know, he said. Not arrogance. Just something claimed, something that had been his all along and was being recognized as such. He went down the stairs. Hermione and Neville were waiting at the bottom. Hermione's folder was tucked under her arm and Neville had his hands in his pockets and was standing up straight. Well? Hermione said. He's moving the stone tonight, Harry said. Quirrell is Dumbledore's problem for now. We stay observant and we tell him if things change. And the rest of it? Neville said. Harry started walking back toward Gryffindor Tower. We keep going, he said. We learn. We prepare. For what specifically? Hermione said, falling into step. For whatever comes next, Harry said. He looked ahead at the castle corridor, the torches in their sconces, the old stone walls with 6 centuries of magic wound through them. 3 days later, Geralt's letter arrived. The Raven dropped it at breakfast and Harry picked it up with the focus of someone expecting important news. It was longer this time. 5 sentences, which for Geralt constituted an essay. Malfoy's solicitor is a man named Rourke Avery. He's dead but his records aren't. Ragnarok found the transfers. 9 accounts across 4 shell guardianships, running for 9 years. He says the Wisengamot seats attached to the dormant houses will activate automatically on your 12th birthday if you claim them before then. Harry read it twice. Put it in his pocket. News? Hermione said. Yes, Harry said. He poured himself tea and looked at the grey October morning through the great hall windows, and thought about Lucius Malfoy in his manor in Wiltshire, and about Wisengamot seats, and about the shape of a problem that was not just Quirrell and not just the stone but was larger and older and rooted in a world that had been mismanaged, quietly and systematically, for a very long time. He had 1 year at Hogwarts under his belt and the beginning of a picture. He was going to need the full picture before his 12th birthday. He picked up his fork and ate breakfast, and the day moved on around him with all its ordinary extraordinary weight. Chapter 6, Blood and Fire. November came in cold and purposeful, stripping the last of the trees and settling over Hogwarts with the particular grey weight of a season that meant business. The lake went dark. The grounds went frost-hard. The castle drew in around itself and the fires in the common rooms became genuinely necessary rather than atmospheric. Harry noticed Quirrell on a Monday. Not for the first time, obviously. He'd been watching Quirrell for months with the patient attention of someone who had learned that the most dangerous thing in any environment was the thing that was pretending not to be dangerous. But Monday was different. Monday, Quirrell arrived at the defense classroom 15 minutes late, which had never happened, and stood at the front with the stutter entirely absent and the nervous manner entirely absent and something behind the eyes that was fully present and fully focused in a way it hadn't been since the forest. The moon dust had worn off. Harry registered this with the flat calm of someone updating a threat assessment and wrote a brief note on the corner of his parchment. Hermione, 2 seats to his left, caught his eye. He gave her a slight nod. She looked at Quirrell for 3 seconds and then looked back at her notes with the expression of someone who has confirmed something they didn't want to confirm. After class, in the corridor, tonight, Harry said. How do you know it'll be tonight? She asked, keeping her voice level. Because he's out of time, Harry said. The unicorn blood is fading, the moon dust suppression is gone, and Dumbledore moved the stone last week. Quirrell doesn't know the stone is gone yet, but he's running out of options and whatever's driving him knows it. He paused. He'll go for it tonight before he loses whatever physical advantage the unicorn blood gave him. Should we tell Dumbledore? Neville said, from his other side. I sent a letter this morning, Harry said. But Dumbledore is in London, there's a ministry event, it's in the Prophet. Someone sent him a message claiming Flamel needed an urgent meeting. It's a diversion. Hermione stopped walking. Someone warned Voldemort that Dumbledore would be away tonight. Yes, Harry said. Someone in this castle. Or someone watching it, Harry said. It doesn't matter right now. What matters is that Quirrell goes through tonight and the stone is gone. He'll hit empty room and whatever's left of Voldemort in him, will know, Hermione said. We'll know the stone's been moved. And then he'll either flee or, try to find another way, Harry said. Or try to take something else. Someone else. He said the last part simply, without emphasis, because the emphasis wasn't needed. The 3 of them stood in the corridor while the school moved around them, students heading to lunch, the ordinary noise of several hundred children in an enclosed space doing entirely normal things. We go through the trapdoor, Neville said. We go through the trapdoor, Harry confirmed. Hermione opened her mouth. I know we agreed to tell Dumbledore first, Harry said. I sent the letter. He's not here. The diversion worked. This is the contingency. And if we can't get back up, she said. Then we deal with what's down there and find another way up, Harry said. Hermione. I've been in worse situations. You've been in worse situations, she said, with the precise emphasis of someone pointing out that the distribution of this statement is uneven. You've read every book in this school's library about defensive magic, Harry said. Neville, your herbological knowledge has gotten 3 Hufflepuffs out of emergency situations this term. And I've been doing this since I was 9. He looked at them both. We're the best option available. That's not arrogance. It's just the accounting. Neville and Hermione looked at each other. Something passed between them, the shorthand of people who had been through enough together to have a private language. After dinner, Hermione said. We need supplies. And I need 20 minutes in the library. You have 30, Harry said. She was done in 23. The third-floor corridor at 9:30 was quiet and dark and held the particular quality of a place where something significant had already been set in motion. The door stood open. Not forced, opened, the lock undone by someone who knew what they were doing. Quirrell had already gone through. Harry looked at the open door and at the darkness beyond it and made a quick decision about order. "Hermione behind me, Neville rear," he said. "Neville, if anything comes up from behind, don't hesitate." "I won't," Neville said, with a steadiness that would have surprised his grandmother considerably. They went in. The first room was Fluffy, or had been. The great three-headed dog was asleep in the corner with the deep, helpless sleep of something that had been played into unconsciousness, a battered harp on the floor still producing the last fading notes of something. Harry looked at Fluffy for a moment, all three heads, the enormous paws, the slow rolling breath, and felt the specific fondness he had for large, dangerous things that were not, at their core, malicious. "Harp is running down," he said. "We go now." The trapdoor was open. He jumped through without checking the drop, which made Hermione make a sound, but he'd assessed the dimensions of the room and the likely depth and trusted the assessment. He landed, rolled, came up in a crouch with his wand out. Devil's snare. Everywhere. The dark, sinuous plant reaching and curling in the absolute blackness of the underground room, and Hermione came through next and shouted Lumos Solum before she'd fully landed and the brilliant sunlight charm hit the devil's snare and it recoiled and they had a clear path in about 4 seconds. Neville landed, looked at the retreating plant, and said, "Hermione, the sun intensity is a bit high for the root system, you're going to damage it permanently." "It was trying to kill us, Neville," Hermione said. "I know, he adjusted his landing. Never mind." The flying key room was chaos, hundreds of winged keys careening in the dimness, and a locked door, and 3 brooms. Harry was on a broom in the time it took Hermione to cast her first tracking charm, and the thing about 6 years on the continent was that witchers didn't train on brooms but they trained on fast-moving things in difficult conditions and the principle transferred. He found the key, the old one, bent wing, slightly faster than the others because it was scared, in 40 seconds flat and had the door open in 45. Hermione stared at him when he got back down. "How did you? I'll teach you to read movement patterns," Harry said. Through. The chessboard was the most complex obstacle in the structural sense, not because it was difficult to solve, but because it was designed to be difficult at exactly the level that would stop a determined adult who was good at chess. It had not been designed for someone who had spent years studying tactical positioning as a matter of staying alive. Harry stood at the edge of the board and looked at it for about 30 seconds. "White always moves first in chess," Hermione said. "We're replacing pieces," Harry said. "We need to be black. Black responds rather than initiates, I can see the whole board from the reactive position." He walked to 3 specific pieces, knight, bishop, rook, and looked at Neville and Hermione. "Knight and bishop are safe. Rook is me." "Harry," Hermione started. "I have the fastest response time and the best spatial calculation," Harry said. "It has to be the rook. The rook has the most ground to cover and will take the most direct hits." He met her eyes. "I'll be fine." She looked at him for a moment with the expression she sometimes had, the one that was simultaneously exasperated and deeply, specifically trusting. "If you die, I'm going to be extremely angry with you." "Noted," Harry said, and got on the rook. The game lasted 12 moves. Harry took 4 hits, the enchanted pieces connected with the force of their category, and a rook took significant blows in the course of the game, and by the end his left shoulder was bleeding through his jacket and there was a cut above his ear and he felt like he'd been in a brief but committed brawl, which was actually a familiar condition. He directed Hermione and Neville through the game from his position and their moves had been clean and well executed, and when checkmate came the white pieces swept aside and the door opened and Harry climbed down from the rook and rolled his shoulder to check the damage. Deep bruising, the shoulder cut bleeding but not arterially. The head cut was shallow. He'd had worse from the necker at 9. "You're bleeding," Hermione said. "I know," Harry said. "Significantly." Hermione, he said, patiently. Right, she said, and dug out the dittany she'd brought from her bag and applied it with the efficient care of someone who had read extensively about field medicine. The troll room should be next, she said, while she worked. Should be, Harry said. It wasn't a troll. They'd expected a troll. What they found instead was the logic puzzle, the potions room, Snape's contribution, 7 bottles and a riddle burned into parchment on a table. Fire in front, fire behind, and the subtle intellectual satisfaction of a puzzle designed by someone who respected the craft of it. Hermione read the riddle once and solved it in 2 minutes. Poison, poison, wine, smallest moves you forward, she said. Second from the left. Harry picked it up. Considered. Looked at the set of bottles for a moment with his head tilted, the particular listening thing, and put it back. Not the second from the left, he said. She stared at him. The riddle is right, Harry said. But Snape didn't build this in a vacuum. He built it knowing that someone who taught the riddle to students or referenced it in any text would have an advantage. So the content of the riddle is accurate but the presentation has been reversed. He's accounted for someone smart solving it the obvious way. He looked at the bottles. The riddle is right about the proportions and the positions relative to each other. But the line has been flipped left to right. He picked up the second from the right. Hermione stared at the parchment for a long moment. Went back through it. Her expression moved through resistance and then into the specific quality of someone who has realized they've been outpitched on their own specialty. She stopped. That's actually correct. The rhyme structure inverts in the second stanza, it's subtle, it's very subtle, the meter flips. Snape is good at subtle, Harry said. Do you actually like him? She said, with genuine curiosity. I respect what he knows, Harry said. There's a difference. He looked at the bottle. One of us goes through. The potion won't stretch to 3. It's me, Hermione said immediately. It's me, Harry said. Harry, Hermione. He held her gaze. What's behind this door is the thing that killed my family. I'm not sending you through first. The argument on her face was real and specific, not about courage, she had plenty of that, but about the shape of this thing, who it was for, who it came from. She worked through it in about 4 seconds. I'll go back with Neville, she said. Send an owl to Dumbledore from the Ollery. We'll have the castle alerted. Her voice was steady and her eyes were steady and she was frightened, he could see it, and doing it anyway, which was the only definition of brave that had ever made sense to him. Yes, he said. Harry. She put her hand on his arm briefly, the gesture of someone who has learned that contact can say things that words fumble. Don't be reckless. I'm not reckless, he said. I know, she said. But you're you. It sometimes looks the same from the outside. He almost smiled. Go. He watched them go through the fire behind, 2 shadows retreating into orange light, and then he drank the potion. The cold hit first, the purple flame parting, the chill of it, the passage through into the last room. The final chamber was lit by its own quality of dark, not torchlight, not spell-light, something emanating from the room itself, a faint luminescence that came from the stone and the air and the long-accumulated presence of something that had been here for weeks, building, waiting. Quirrell stood at the far end. His back was to Harry. He was looking at the mirror of Eriste, which stood in the center of the room on its own, the ornate frame catching the dim light, the surface showing something that only the person standing before it could see. I can't get it out, Quirrell said, without turning around. The stutter was completely gone. I can see it. I can see it in the mirror. But I cannot make it come to me. Harry stepped into the room. That's how the mirror works, he said. It shows you what you want, but wanting it is the trap. Dumbledore built it in, only someone who wants to find the stone, not use it, can get it out. You're too focused on what it gives you. Quirrell turned around. The face was Quirrell's, technically, the pale, pinched features, the slight build, but the expression wearing those features was nothing Harry had seen in any classroom. It was a focused, patient, immensely old contempt, the kind that had been refined over decades of watching people fail to measure up. "Harry Potter," Voldemort said, through Quirrell's mouth. "You came alone." "Yes," Harry said. "The moon dust in the forest, that was yours." "Yes. And you came through the protections." A pause, something moving in the borrowed eyes. "Alone, at 11 years old, you came through all of it." "Through most of it," Harry said. "My friends handled several of them." The acknowledgement seemed to interest him. "Loyalty," Voldemort said. "Your mother's quality. It killed her, in the end." "It didn't kill her," Harry said. "You did. There's a difference. Her choice to stand in front of me isn't a weakness in her. It's a failure in you, you couldn't account for it, which means you didn't understand it, which means you had a blind spot that cost you everything." He watched the face. "You still have it." Quirrell's eyes narrowed. "I know about the Horcruxes," Harry said. Silence. It was a bluff, partial. He knew there were anchors, remnants, things Voldemort had done to tether himself to existence. He'd read enough fragmentary references in old dark magic texts in the restricted section over the past month to understand the shape without having the full picture. But he knew enough to know the word and what it meant for this fragment in front of him. "You cannot know about," Quirrell started. "I know that this," Harry gestured at all of Quirrell, at the shared body, at the desperate diminished presence inside it, "is not all of you. I know you have tethers. I know that destroying this remnant doesn't finish it, not permanently." He held the possessed man's gaze. "Which means this isn't the end of the conversation. It's the opening move." The thing in Quirrell looked at him for a long, still moment. "Give me the stone," Voldemort said. "It's not here for Flamel's life. I need a body. A proper body. I will take the stone and rebuild, and when I return I will remember that you were," a pause, something that was almost genuine in it. "Interesting." "No," Harry said. "Then I'll take it from the mirror myself." "You can't," Harry said. "I already told you why." "Then I'll take it from you," Voldemort said, and Quirrell moved. Harry had been waiting for the move since entering the room. He'd known it was coming. The conversation had never been negotiation, it had been Voldemort buying time to think of an approach and Harry using the same time to read the room. And what the room told him was this: Quirrell's body was failing. The unicorn blood curse was deep in him now, the rotting that came with that particular choice. His movements were slightly wrong, slightly delayed, the connection between the will driving him and the body executing that will fraying at the edges. Harry moved right, dropped under the first curse, wordless, dark, the kind that left a mark in the air where it passed, and came up in sign position, left hand making the shape of the Quen sign, the protective force field expanding outward in a hemisphere that was, here, in this world with its richer underlying magic, considerably more substantial than the continent version. The second curse hit the Quen and broke on it like water on stone. Quirrell looked at the sign. "Witcher magic," he said. The contempt was genuine, but the curiosity underneath it was too, which was an interesting combination. "Among other things," Harry said, and cast a reducto with his wand at the floor between them, not at Quirrell, at the stone, the impact kicking up debris and force and a cloud of dust that broke Quirrell's line of sight for 2 seconds. He moved through it. Close range was not Quirrell's comfortable territory. Close range, with a failing body and an occupying presence that was used to working through distance and power, was a different problem than fighting someone at the end of a wand. Harry got inside the arm and drove his elbow into Quirrell's chest and felt it, the burning. Not metaphorical. Actual burning, starting at the point of contact and spreading up his arm, the same thing that had happened at every incidental contact with Quirrell all term, the thing Harry had registered and filed and finally understood in the forest. His mother's magic. The protection she'd left in him. Whatever Voldemort was, whatever fragment of him occupied Quirrell, it could not bear contact with the magic his mother had died to put into him. It burned them both. Harry gritted his teeth against the pain in his arm. He didn't let go. He took Quirrell's wrist and held it, both hands now, the burning escalating to something that was genuinely difficult to manage, and Quirrell screamed, both voices, Quirrell's high and panicked and the other thing underneath it, a sound that had no real human register, something from a frequency that the medallion rang against. "Let me go," Voldemort hissed. "Let me go or I will." "You'll what?" Harry said, through his teeth. "You're a fragment in a dying man. You have nothing." "I have everything," Voldemort said, and the surge of power that came out of Quirrell was enormous and indiscriminate, and Harry took the full weight of it at contact range, which threw him back across the chamber and into the mirror. The mirror rocked. Didn't fall. Harry hit the floor and lay there for a moment taking stock, shoulder re-damaged, the arm that had been burning was now also bleeding, there was a concussive quality to his thinking that suggested hitting the stone had not done his head any favors, and Quirrell was across the room and had not moved since the surge. Harry looked at him. Quirrell's hands were, disintegrating was the word that came to mind, though it was not quite accurate, not ash or dust but something more like dissolution, the body unable to maintain itself, the vessel too far gone, Voldemort's desperation having pushed past what the ruined physical form could sustain. Harry stood up. His legs were steady. He made them steady. The pain in his arm was considerable and he set it aside with the particular practiced compartmentalization of someone who had learned years ago that physical pain was information and not a crisis, and he walked toward Quirrell with his wand at his side rather than raised, because raising it was not necessary. "There's no body here for you," he said, quietly. "There's no stone. Whatever you were going to do tonight, it's over." "You," Quirrell said, and it was more Quirrell now, coming back as the other presence retreated, the professor's real voice surfacing through the dissolution, cracked and exhausted and terrified in the pure, genuine way of a man who had looked at what had been living inside him and was now face to face with what he'd agreed to. "I didn't, it promised, I didn't know." "I know," Harry said, to Quirrell specifically. Then the something that had been Voldemort came out. It left Quirrell's body in a rush that Harry felt before he saw, a displacement of air, a cold that was deeper than the room, and then a shape that was not a shape exactly but was a presence, a dark that moved, passing through Harry as it went. He felt it hit him. In the scar, specifically, the lightning bolt his mother's final act had carved into him, the point where two magics had met 11 years ago, and the passage of what was left of Voldemort through that spot was like a heated blade going through ice. He made a sound he wasn't pleased about and put his hand to his forehead and gripped. Then it was gone. The chamber was still. Quirrell was on the floor, no longer dissolving, just lying very still with the quality of something emptied out. Alive, Harry checked, pulse was there, faint and irregular but there. Whatever the aftermath of being Voldemort's vessel looked like, Quirrell would be the one to live it, and that was information for Dumbledore to deal with. Harry sat down on the floor next to the mirror of Eriste and looked at himself in it. He was not sure what he expected. What he expected, based on what the mirror did, was something he wanted, Geralt, probably, which was a thought he had before he could prevent it. His parents. Something like that. What he saw instead was himself, standing exactly as he was, with the burning arm and the bleeding and the look of someone who had just done what needed doing. Just himself. No addition to the image. No version of what he didn't have. He looked at that for a moment. Then he stood up, because Dumbledore was going to walk through this door eventually and Harry would prefer to be vertical when that happened. Dumbledore arrived 12 minutes later, which was faster than the diversion to London should have allowed, and Harry registered this with a filing away quality that said Dumbledore had anticipated the possibility that tonight might be the night and had not been entirely in London at all. He looked at the chamber. At Quirrell on the floor. At the mirror. At Harry, standing in front of it with a burned and bleeding arm and the general appearance of someone who had recently been in several consecutive fights. "The stone," Dumbledore said. "Is not here," Harry said. "You moved it. Quirrell couldn't get it from the mirror. We established that." He held Dumbledore's gaze. And then I held on to Quirrell until Voldemort's remnant couldn't sustain the vessel. You made direct contact, Dumbledore said. Yes. Knowingly. Yes, Harry said. My mother's protection burns whatever Voldemort is when it touches him. That was worth using. He paused. He's gone. For tonight. Not permanently, I know about the Horcruxes. We're going to need to have that conversation. Dumbledore looked at him for a long, measuring moment. Yes, he said. We are. He crouched beside Quirrell, checking him with a focused, practiced attention. He'll survive. He'll need a great deal of help. I know, Harry said. He was a person who made a bad choice and didn't understand the cost. That doesn't resolve the choice. But it's true. Dumbledore looked up at him. You're 11 years old, he said, not quite accusatorially. Technically 11 and a half, Harry said. Something moved in Dumbledore's face that was not amusement but was adjacent to it in the way that real things are often adjacent to other real things. He stood. Come to my office, he said. After the hospital wing. I'll come to the hospital wing, Harry said. And then I'm going to find Hermione and Neville. And then my office, Dumbledore said. And then your office, Harry agreed. Madame Pomfrey had opinions about the arm that she expressed at length while treating it, and Harry let her, because she was good at her job and she'd earned the opinions and she had that specific quality of someone who expressed care through controlled exasperation. He sat on the hospital bed and let her work and thought about what came next. Hermione arrived at a near run, which for Hermione meant something. She came to a stop beside his bed, looked at the arm, looked at his face, and said, "You're fine." "Yes," Harry said. "Good," she said, and sat down in the chair beside him with the air of someone who has been maintaining a great deal of composure for a long time and is very glad to be able to release some of it into the general vicinity of the person they'd been maintaining it for. Neville came in behind her, also at speed, and looked at Harry with that steady look he'd developed over the term, the one that was no longer uncertain, just clear. "Done," Neville said. "For tonight," Harry said. "There's more. But not tonight." Neville nodded. "My Gran is going to ask me if anything interesting happened this term," he said. "What will you tell her?" Harry said. "Nothing she's ready to hear," Neville said, and sat down. Dumbledore's office at midnight was warmer than Harry expected, or perhaps the warmth was a function of the fire being higher than usual, or perhaps Fawkes was radiating something. The Phoenix looked at Harry as he came in with the same calm, assessing attention as before, then made a low, melodic sound and extended one wing slightly. Harry looked at him. "Hello," he said, to the Phoenix. Fawkes trilled. "He likes you," Dumbledore said, from behind his desk. "I can see that," Harry said, and sat down in the chair across from Dumbledore without being invited, because it was past midnight and they were past that particular social form. Dumbledore looked at him across the desk. The half-moon glasses caught the firelight. Behind them, the eyes were very much awake and very much attending. "The Horcruxes," Harry said. "I know the concept. I don't know the specifics. How many, where they are, what they are." He held Dumbledore's gaze. "You've been investigating." "I know you have because the library's restricted section has been accessed recently in a very specific pattern that follows the literature on soul magic, and you're the only one who goes in there at 2 in the morning." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. "You've been tracking my library usage." "I noticed a pattern," Harry said. Dumbledore breathed out slowly, the breath of someone deciding something. "I believe there are 6, he said. 6 Horcruxes, created over the course of Voldemort's adult life, each containing a fragment of his soul, each one his guarantee against final death." He stopped. "One has already been destroyed, a diary, I suspect, though I haven't confirmed it yet. That leaves potentially 5. And," he paused, the pause of someone about to say something they find genuinely difficult. I believe there may be an accidental seventh. Harry looked at him. The night in Godric's Hollow, Dumbledore said, quietly. When Voldemort's killing curse rebounded. His soul was so unstable by that point, so fractured by the 6 deliberate creations, that the destruction of his body may have caused a fragment to latch onto the nearest living thing. He met Harry's eyes. I have not been certain enough to say this definitively. But tonight, watching what happened when you made contact, you think it's in me, Harry said. I think it may be, Dumbledore said. In the scar. I think that's what Voldemort's remnant was drawn to, not just the protection, but the resonance. Recognizing something of itself. Harry sat with this for a moment. It landed in him the way significant things landed, not with panic, not with the performance of panic, but with the cool, settling weight of information that changes the shape of a problem. He turned it over. Examined it from the angles he could access right now and acknowledged the ones he couldn't yet. If it's true, he said. If there's a fragment in the scar. Does it affect me? I believe it has been, Dumbledore said carefully. Your connection to Voldemort's mind and emotions, it may strengthen as he returns to power. That's potentially useful, Harry said. Dumbledore blinked. Most people would not hear that information and immediately find a tactical application. Most people aren't in my position, Harry said. He paused. If there's a fragment in me, destroying it without destroying me, is that possible? Dumbledore held his gaze. I believe so. It may require, he stopped. There are paths I have been considering. Paths that I would have pursued without your knowledge, under different circumstances, in the belief that the decision was mine to make. A pause. I understand now that I was wrong about that. That the decisions about your life and what you carry in it belong to you. Harry looked at him for a long moment. Yes, he said. They do. Then we will find a way, Dumbledore said, that does not require you to give up more than you have already given. He said it with the weight of a commitment, and Harry registered it as such. Good, Harry said. We'll start in September when I'm back. He stood. I want the full briefing on what you know about all 6 Horcruxes over the summer. Written, so I can work through it. That can be arranged, Dumbledore said. Harry moved toward the door. Stopped. Lucius Malfoy, he said. Dumbledore's expression was careful. What about him? He's been siphoning from my inherited vaults for 9 years, Harry said. Ragnarok has the records. The Wisengamot seats attached to the dormant houses activate on my 12th birthday if I claim them before then. He looked at Dumbledore steadily. And Malfoy was a Death Eater who claimed the Imperius Curse. There's a pattern there, his financial access to my vaults over the same years he was building influence in the Ministry, that I want investigated. He paused. Can I count on you for that? Dumbledore looked at him for a moment. Lucius Malfoy has significant political protection, he said. I know, Harry said. That's why I'm asking if I can count on you. Not whether it's easy. A beat. Yes, Dumbledore said. You can count on me. Good night, Harry said, and went through the door, down the spiral stairs, and out into the castle corridor. The owl arrived on the morning of Harry's last day of term. Not the post, separate from the post, earlier, dropping onto the table while the hall was still mostly empty and Harry was eating breakfast in the companionable quiet that he and Hermione and Neville had settled into over the term. The raven landed on his shoulder this time, which was new. It had a small package tied to its leg along with the letter. He untied both. Read the letter first. 2 sentences. Coming to get you. Leave your trunk, I'll deal with it. He looked at the package. Unwrapped it. Inside, folded into a square, was a piece of worn leather, a patch from a saddle. Roach's saddle, specifically, the one that had been repaired twice with slightly different colored thread, and Harry recognized it the way you recognize things that had been part of your daily landscape for 6 years. He held it for a moment. Then put it in his pocket. Gerald's coming, Hermione said, not looking up from her book. Yes, Harry said. To take you home? Harry looked at his plate. Then at the great hall, the long tables, the enchanted ceiling doing a pearl grey December morning, the whole immense living fact of Hogwarts going about its complicated, extraordinary business. For the summer, he said. I'll be back in September. She turned a page. We'll write. Yes, he said. Neville looked up from his toast. Does he know everything? Gerald. Does he know what happened? I wrote him after the forest, Harry said. He knows the broad shape. What will he say about you going through the trapdoor alone? Neville said. Harry considered this honestly. He'll say I should have waited for better intelligence, he said. And he'll be right, technically. And then he'll acknowledge that I had the skills and I used them correctly and the outcome was acceptable. He paused. He'll say it in fewer words than that. Neville smiled. Sounds like a good teacher. He is, Harry said. The day passed in the particular way of last days, exams done, bags packing, the castle beginning its exhale toward the holidays, students thinning out and the corridors going large and quiet. Harry spent the afternoon in the library with Hermione going through the list he'd made for summer reading, the Horcrux research Dumbledore had promised, the Wizengamot procedure he needed to understand before his birthday, the gap filling in his formal wizarding education that the past year had identified. She added 3 books to his list without comment. He added 2 of hers to her list without comment. This was simply how they worked. In the evening, with the first of the students gone and the Hogwarts Express departed and the castle settling around the bones of its remaining population, Harry went up to the astronomy tower and stood in the cold for a while. The grounds below were dark. The lake was still. The Forbidden Forest was a shadow against a sky doing proper winter stars, the same stars he'd looked at from the continent on 1,000 nights, from 100 campsites, from the back of Gerald's horse or with his back against a stone and a fire going and a book in his lap and the sound of a witcher moving around the edges of the camp doing the specific kind of restless patrol that was as comfortable to Harry as breathing. He thought about the year. The 20 houses and what they meant. Lucius Malfoy and the vault records and Ragnarok's careful, patient documentation. Quirrell and what had been inside him. The fragment that might be in the scar. The 5 Horcruxes still out there, in places he didn't know yet, doing the quiet work of keeping something dead alive. He thought about Hermione and Neville and the particular alchemy of 3 people who were very different and genuinely excellent together. He thought about Snape, complex, brilliant, carrying something old that had nothing to do with Harry and everything to do with a grief that had been going on for years. There was more to understand there. He thought about what came next. Second year. The vault audit with Ragnarok. The Wizengamot seats and the political weight they carried and the legal case against Malfoy that was building itself from Gringotts records and Avery's documents. The Horcrux research. His own training, which had not stopped. He practiced signs every morning and worked through potions and read everything Dumbledore sent and wrote letters to Tris Merigold, who had become a useful correspondent on magical theory, and maintained the sword work because keeping an edge was a matter of discipline and respect for the work. There was a great deal ahead. He was not afraid of it. He had never been in the habit of fear as a settling condition. But he was, sober about it, maybe. Clear-eyed in the way of someone who understood the size of a thing and was choosing to walk into it with open eyes rather than hope. He heard the sound below on the grounds before he saw anything, the characteristic rhythm of a horse that was not particularly interested in being quiet. Then Roach came out of the darkness at the edge of the forest path, and Gerald was on her back, and Harry leaned on the astronomy tower railing and watched him come. Gerald pulled up below the tower and looked up. Harry looked down. You could use the door, Harry called down. This was faster, Gerald said. Did you know which tower? Third from the left, Gerald said. Light was on. Harry looked at him for a moment. Then he went down. They met in the courtyard, Roach planting her nose on Harry's shoulder with the proprietorial affection of an animal that had decided a person was part of her herd some years ago and had seen no reason to revise this position. Harry put his hand on her neck and she made a sound of satisfaction and resumed being large at them. Geralt looked at Harry. At the arm in its bandaging, still visible under the sleeve. At the cut above the ear that Madame Pomfrey had healed but had left a thin line. At the whole fact of him, 11.5 years old and looking like he'd had a year. You went through the trapdoor, Geralt said. I had to, Harry said. You could have waited, Dumbledore was in London, Harry said. There was no one else. Hermione and Neville were there and we had the skills for it and the timing was the timing. He held Geralt's yellow eyes steadily. I made the right call. I know you know I made the right call. A beat. You made the right call, Geralt said. Your left shoulder presentation is off. Whatever hit it is still compensating. Madame Pomfrey said a week, Harry said. What was it? Enchanted chess piece. Geralt's expression moved through something that was not quite surprise. Chess piece. Large one, Harry said. Rook. A further moment of something that on someone else might have been the ghost of amusement and on Geralt was a very slight shift in the set of his jaw. He put a hand on Harry's uninjured shoulder briefly, the contact of the specific, practiced kind that didn't make a production of itself. The Voldemort fragment, Harry said. In the scar. Dumbledore thinks it's real. I know, Geralt said. He wrote to me. Harry went still. Dumbledore wrote to you. 2 days ago, Geralt said. Full briefing. The Horcruxes, the theory about the scar, what he knows and what he doesn't. He paused. He asked my opinion on the best approach for a young person carrying an involuntary magical anchor. Harry looked at him. What did you say? I said the young person in question would figure out his own best approach, Geralt said, and the best thing everyone else could do was give him complete information and not make decisions on his behalf. He paused again. And I said that the fragment in the scar had had 11 years of exposure to whatever I put into this boy and I wasn't worried about it. Harry was quiet for a moment. Whatever you put into me, he said. Training, Geralt said. Values. The specific practice of walking toward things rather than away from them. A pause. Other things. Other things, Harry said. Don't make it a thing, Geralt said. You literally just said, I know what I said, Geralt said. I'm saying don't make it a thing. Harry looked at him for a long moment with those green eyes that didn't miss anything and never had, and Geralt endured the looking with the dignified sufferance of a man who knew he'd walked into it. Okay, Harry said. I won't make it a thing. Good, Geralt said. Thank you, Harry said. For coming. You're ready to leave. My trunk's in the dormitory, Harry said. And I want to say goodbye to Hermione and Neville. 15 minutes, Geralt said, with the air of someone who knew perfectly well it would be 30 and was accounting for it. Harry took 32 minutes. When he came back into the courtyard, Geralt was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and the particular quality of a man who had been waiting and was going to mention it in a way that didn't mention it. Hermione gave me a summer reading list, Harry said. Of course she did, Geralt said. It's a good list, Harry said. I know, Geralt said. I can see it from here. They rode out through the Hogwarts gates as the last of the December light gave out and the winter dark moved in to replace it. The grounds were quiet, the castle behind them lit in its towers and windows, its enormous complicated presence filling the sky the way it always did, unapologetically, completely, as if it had simply decided to be exactly what it was and saw no reason to negotiate about it. Harry looked back once. Not with reluctance. With the specific, clear-eyed regard of someone who knew the place was part of their story and was going to be part of it for a long time, and found that to be simply true rather than sentimental. Then he faced forward. Summer, he said. We need to start on the Horcrux research. And there's a Wisengamot procedure filing I need to do before my birthday. And Ragnar wants to schedule the vault audit. And your shoulder, Geralt said. And my shoulder, Harry allowed. What else? Geralt said, in the tone of someone who knew there was something else. Harry was quiet for a moment. The road opened up ahead of them, the winter fields on either side, the stars above them beginning to commit. There are 5 Horcruxes out there, Harry said. Objects. Hiding places. Things that need to be found and destroyed before Voldemort can come back permanently. He paused. And he is coming back. Not tonight. Not this year, maybe. But he's coming back. That a problem? Geralt said. It's a contract, Harry said. A complicated one. Multi-stage. The preparation time is the whole thing. He looked at the road ahead. And I intend to be ready for every stage of it. Geralt made a sound that was not quite agreement and not quite acknowledgement and was somehow both, the specific sound of a person who has watched someone grow into something real and is responding to the reality of it. They rode. The darkness was comfortable the way known darkness always is. The stars were the ones Harry had looked at from the astronomy tower, the same ones he'd learned on the continent, the ones that didn't change no matter which world you stood in. Geralt, Harry said. Next year is going to be harder than this year. Probably, Geralt said. But we've had harder, Harry said. We have, Geralt said. Okay, Harry said. And the road went on, and the year behind them settled into what it was, and the one ahead was still the shape of a thing that hadn't happened yet but was absolutely, certainly coming, full of problems and contracts and political wars and dark objects hidden in unknown places and people who had underestimated Harry Potter for the last time. He was not afraid of any of it. He had never been in the habit.